Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Godlike Naruto x Winter schnee rwby. Before I start, please support for more amazing content and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by Flames of Azure and link in description and support writer. Let's start the video. Two young children played together in a large backyard. Both had hair of white like most of their family. The girl's hair was in a long braided ponytail and she wore a rather fancy white and light blue dress. The boy had short spiky hair and wore some fancy clothes as well in white slacks and a light blue shirt. Both played a game with an older white-haired girl as she wore a white bony mask with the face of a wolf. "I gonna eat you." "No." The little girl laughed with a high-pitched scream. "I got you," the young boy declared as he stood in front of the girl protectively with a cocky smirk. "You won't wolf me or my sister down." Laughter soon followed from a woman who looked like all her children but had sadness in her eyes. "Naruto. I am going to get you for this," a female voice screamed out in rage. The same boy, now older at 10, chuckled as he observed a massive party going on in the large living room his family owned. He was in a three-piece white and dark blue suit that his father demanded he wore even when the man was not around. He still had a small smirk on his face, only this time because he played a small prank of their older sister. The classic pie to the face. While his twin distracted her during his own escape down the long hallways of their mansion. He wouldn't admit it, but his older sister was scary when mad. At least his little brother thought the whole thing was funny. Still, he found he really liked the name Naruto that has tricked his sisters and mother into calling him. He was Aries Schnee, but something deep within told him that his real name had been this strange foreign name that he instantly took a liking to. Deciding to waste time in order for her to cool down, he casually walked down the halls and observed some of their pictures. One of his favorites was one that he was told was of his grandfather. That man was nothing like the man he called father, who was a shrewd businessman compared to the huntsman adventurer. The older man was his hero and loved his family when he was alive. He was broad of his thoughts when he heard yelling. Walking over to a nearby door that he remembered was his father's den. There was a crack in the door and so he peeked in. "Why aren't you at the party?" His mother roared at their father, who looked at her dismissively. Come to think of it, he looked at all of them like that. Like they were beneath his time. "It's our twin's 10th birthday. You have been hiding yourself away more and more from us. Do we matter?" The man, his father, had an agitated look on his mustached face. "Fine woman, no, none of you matter but the schnee name that I am working to raise higher into the world," he finally replied callously. What?" His mother whispered in near silent horror and it sparked something in the youth. Anger. He had already figured his father was a slime ball only looking for power, but he kept silent, not wanting to hurt his family with that info. Now that man just spits it out and he could see he was right to keep that info locked away. It hurt his mother. "Willow, you were born into this world of riches. I wasn't. I learned long ago that reputation and money are all that matters in this world. I had to claw, cheat and murder to get where I was when I met you." He roared out with a manic look in his eyes. "I didn't want what I perceived as good to stop, so I convinced your father to let me marry you and you were such an obedient little thing too. I gifted you with my heirs as thanks. Still, it wasn't enough, so I further convinced that old fool to give me the company and look where I have taken it. The Schnee Dust Company is one of the most powerful companies in all of Remnant." He scoffed as he gave her an annoyed look before grabbing her arm painfully. "You were just a stepping stone to my greatness and now that you know, you will continue to act your part. The reputation of the Schnee family is mine now, so you, nor Winter, Aries Weiss or Whitley, will cause problems for me. Do you understand?" "Sock, you're hurting me." "Answer me, woman." "Rah!" Naruto screamed in rage as his semblance activated, the telltale glyph appearing and rammed into his father's solar plexus with the force of a rampaging Borbodisk, breaking his hold on his mother and laying him out flat on the ground. Seeing the man on the ground, Naruto's cold blue eyes pierced the man's, who seemed frozen at the sudden outburst and the pain he felt. "Do not touch her." Naruto sat in his father's desk chair with a shit-eating grin. The only reason he was in here was the man was supposed to be on some business venture, engaged in something morally ambiguous, no doubt. But the 13-year-old didn't care despite Weiss's warning. As long as the man did not touch his mother or sisters, he was calm and didn't care much about what happened to him. Of course, Winter was already in the Atlas military, away from them so he didn't have to worry much about her. Then there was Whitley or as he liked to call him, Jacques Mini-Me. The brat idolized their father not caring what was the truth or not. Anyway, Naruto was going over the extensive notes and calculations he had sprawled across a good portion of the desk with an old tome and a map at the center. The tome itself was a text written by an ancestor and had been stored in that archive his grandfather seemed to be the only one aware of. At least until Naruto spotted him exiting it one night. The first entry of the text greatly intrigued Naruto, and it had been a growing pet project over the past couple of months in his spare time. The text started with a rather dark tale of four powerful warriors that seemed to have a connection to the tale of the seasons. At the time these were referred to as the Grim Nightmares and extremely dangerous. So much so that the ancestors spent the rest of their days tracking down every scrap of information with the intended goal to destroy whatever remained, especially some kind of relics that defined each of these four. The reason Naruto was smiling was because he had finished correlating everything and with a flourish marked on the map a possible location to one of these relics. But Naruto's feeling of victory was short-lived, for Jacques soon came bursting into the study raving in rage about the White Fang, again. He was about to vent onto Naruto when the youth came into his sights, but stopped upon seeing the tome and the marked map. Everything became a blood-red haze for Naruto after that. Oh sure. He had found one of the nightmare's resting places, but that is where everything went wrong. There was panic, chaos, and people scrambling about. One such expedition member, in their panic, knocked him over and into a container, the one with the assumed relic belonging to the nightmare inside it. Upon making contact, he was nothing more than a raging beast as the relic's power consumed his mind. So lost was he, the expedition his father hired was wiped out. Naruto could only suffer in excruciating agony as time slowly became irrelevant, a presence he didn't have the luxury to notice would rise and he would be slammed with memories. Memories that were not his but showed suffering not so different. This continued until the clarity came and the agony ended. But the clarity, he soon found out the source that gave it to him and in gratitude gave it a name, one that flitted in and out of his mind but never had something to attach it to. And that name was Kurama. Soon after Kurama advised him to go on a little journey to find some people and to train. And since Naruto was already out of reach of his father, he would play life his way. Find the people and really be Naruto. Not Aries Schnee, the misfit son of Jacques Schnee. He soon found he was already on the continent of Anima, which already helped with his task. Near the capital of the kingdom, Mistal, Naruto soon felt a pull and followed it. The pull led him to a hidden little speakeasy for the underage that wanted to try their tastes of alcohol. At the bar sat one of Naruto's task objectives. Because, Naruto said, voice barely above a whisper, to that objective, like me you'll wind up a free man. After a hard sell in theatric song and dance form, after temporarily relocating to a stage, Naruto was soon back to being on the road again, but this time not alone. Now it was the Sanus continent's turn. Here Naruto and his companion of over a month felt like they were dying from the hellish heat the sun and sand produced. Thankfully their suffering was worth it when in a blink and miss moment the next objective descended upon them. When all was said and done, Naruto and now two companions left the scorching desert. The last objective was surprisingly found in the kingdom of Vale and near the destroyed settlement of Lower Karen. Along the way, the trio encountered powerful and strange Grim, but each battle only served to make them and their eventual new addition stronger and stronger. 4 years later. Ring ring. Naruto looked at his scroll and upon seeing the ID, picked up with a casual tone, hello mother dearest, how are things at home? Tense as always dear, but thank you for keeping in touch with me at least. You are driving winter up the walls with your cat and mouse game, and Weiss is torn between so worried for your health and wanting to kill you with her bare hands because she feels that deep down, you aren't as dead as your father proclaims. Whitley is Whitley. Willow sighed heavily. What about you, Mom? If you weren't on my side and always looking out for me like you always seem to do, then I feel I'd be a different woman. Willow seemed to pause for a moment and then said, but this isn't about me, it is about Weiss. She left. What do you mean she left? Naruto asked, concern and worry about to rise into panic territory. She finally had enough of your father and left like Winter did, but she did not join the Atlas military. She's heading to Beacon. Birds of a feather, Naruto said lightly as calm replaced the near panic, I'm on my way there myself. Naruto awoke from his slumber with a jolt because of two reasons. The loud PA system saying the bullhead he was riding had arrived at Beacon and the other because some blonde teen in white armor tripped over his outstretched leg in his rush to go puke somewhere while a couple of girls screamed about how gross it was that they got some of their shoes. It was an amusing way to wake up from memory lane. Once the ship landed and they were able to get off, the blonde kid rushed out first to go and find a trash can to vomit in. Naruto had to admit, motion sickness was pretty damn rough and truthfully, he could use that in a prank if the boy ever pissed him off. Something told him he wouldn't have to do that. But man, not even a minute here and he was already plotting and not thinking of friendship. Ugh, Kurama really got to him sometimes. What he needed to do was go and find his sister, and funnily enough, he didn't have to look very long because one of the girls that got vomit on their shoes fell right onto her stuff. Crossing his arms with a smirk, he decided to wait this one out while nodding to some faces he became familiar with in the past 4 years. some keeping to themselves, one in particular attracting way too much attention from the opposite sex. Go figure. The reason for the small distance was because their curse was old and they felt that if people knew about their connection too quickly, things could go south. That and the fact that Salem's friends were always watching for a time to strike. "What are you doing?" The somewhat snarky voice of his twin called out to the girl that fell on her stuff. Poor kid got in early and has to deal with someone's temper this early in the morning. Naruto had to admit though, his sister looked cute in what she picked out for combat attire. Weiss wore a thigh-length strapless dress with a faint color gradation from white to pale blue at the hem. A small piece of black lace sits in the front of her neckline and the hem of the dress was scalloped and stitched to resemble snowflakes, with layers of white tulle under the skirt. Over this, she wore a bell-sleeved bolero with the same color gradation as her dress from shoulder to wrist, lined in red and with a ruffled collar. On the back of the bolero is the schnee crest. She also had on a small apple pendant on a silver chain and thin, rectangular silver earrings. Her boots are white, wedged-heeled, and higher at the back than the front. They have a small silver decoration across the top of the foot and are lined in red. A thin white sash is tied around her waist with a pouch attached to the back. Naruto also noticed the small addition to her face, a scar above and below her right eye. That he was going to have to ask about. "Sorry," the girl in primarily red and black explained as she tried to get back up from having fallen on suitcases and then the rest fell on her. He caught that her eyes were silver in her panic and it seemed to make Kurama nervous. Odd. In addition to her unique eyes, she had neck-length black hair with red tips. Her red and black clothes were a black long-sleeved blouse with a high collar and red trim on the silver, over which was a black waist cincher with red lacing up the front and matching skirt with red lining. She also had a pair of thick black stockings and black combat boots with red laces, red trims around the top, and red soles. It was topped by a red hooded cloak fastened to her shoulders by cross-shaped pins. Finally, she had a silver rose that looked to be on fire on her belt. Neat. Clearly, both went for some speed in their battle skirts. "Sorry. Do you have any idea of the damage you could have caused?" His sister argued, but he could see that in a way, she was looking out for Red. No doubt she had some volatile dust in those suitcases. Turns out, he was right when she opened one. "This is dust, mined and purified from the schnee quarry." What are you, brain dead? Dust. Fire. Water. Lightning. Energy. Are you even listening to me?" Weiss went on, but with every word, she shook the vials of dust, making them trickle down to the other girl's nose. Naruto shook his head at that. No doubt Weiss wasn't even paying any attention to that. No doubt in her anger and worries, and maybe annoyance in having to deal with someone younger than her like Whitley, that she was one handling the dust haphazardly. Is any of this sinking in? What do you have to say for yourself? Achoo. Naruto had to bite his fist to keep from laughing too hard at the dust explosion that surrounded his sister. In a way, that was her own doing. He did manage to notice a friend give the two girls a look before going about their business and into the school. Unbelievable. That was the exact thing I was talking about. Weiss started on her tirade at the girl as she shuffled out of the dust cloud. "I am really sorry." Red tried to apologize sincerely and Naruto felt that he had to step in while smiling kindly at a quiet raven-haired girl walking up to them as well. She didn't react much as she stared at the other two girls with a book in one hand and a vial of dust in the other. No doubt that had been blasted away in the explosion. "Ugh. You complete dolt. What are?" Both girls heard a male chuckle and then familiar voice with a teasing edge that the one dressed in white hadn't heard in 4 years. "I'm a little hurt, Weiss." Both girls whipped around to the source. "I mean having a blast without me. We're supposed to be family." Weiss's eyes widened as she saw the person. "Aries," she said, her voice cracking with emotion, before rushing over and embracing him. "It's really you, Aries." "Yes it is, my dear sister," Naruto said softly to Weiss, wrapping his arms around her in a comforting fashion. "I'm back." While a cute scene to Red, she had to admit this Aries guy looked rather imposing in the attire he picked out for himself. He wore a red armored shirt with an open, long-sleeved mid-waisted gray-blue jacket, complete with a white puffed collar and red accents, along with matching pants. He also had on a black choker and had two small wing-like attachments that acted as small capes that flowed off his back in the wind from his jacket. They were black on the inside and red on the outside. His black shoes were made for combat but looked like fancy dress shoes with red trim outlining the bottom. He also wore armored black gloves with the fingers all being red. Finally, he wore what looked like a sword hilt with no blade, with an integrated ultra-compact dust cylinder. The lack of a blade is the part that made her curiosity rise. So, the rumors were true. However, that curiosity would have to wait as another person decided to join in their conversation. She was a fair-skinned young woman with wavy black hair and amber eyes. She had on a black button vest with coattails and a single silver button on the front. Underneath this was a white, sleeveless, high-necked, crop undershirt and white shorts with a zipper on the front of each leg, emblazoned with the IK logo of the real-life Japanese zipper manufacturer. She wore a pair of black low-heeled boots and full stockings, with a color gradation of black to purple at her ankles. Her emblem is visible on the outside of both thighs just below her shorts in white. On her left arm is a black detached sleeve with a silver cuff around her bicep, and black ribbons are wrapped around both forearms. A small, loose black scarf is wrapped around her neck and a gray magnetic backpack is strapped to her back, hidden by her hair. Finally, a black ribbon was tied with a large bow on the top of her head, with her cat ears hidden inside the loops, and she wore purple eyeshadow in cat's eye style. Naruto turned his attention to the girl. He wondered what rumor she meant. In a rather cool tone, she eyed both Naruto and Weiss passively, but there was a small hint of annoyance. Schnee is alive. Sorry, who? Red asked, relieved that most of the negative attention was not directed at her anymore. However, she was curious about the person who inadvertently saved her from a verbal beatdown in the form of an angry girl in white. The Ravenet gave her a passing glance before returning to the twins. Aries and Weiss Schnee, heirs to the Schnee Dust Company. One of the largest producers of energy propellant in the world. Finally, some recognition. Weiss replied with a smile, but noticed that Naruto wasn't smiling. That was right, he wasn't as proud of their last name as others are. Something tells me that you don't approve though. Naruto replied flatly. How can I when it is also infamous for its controversial labor forces and questionable business partners? The Ravenet continued with a glare, but there was confusion in her eyes when she saw he looked apologetic about that. Before Weiss could get offended by this, Naruto smiled gently and placed a silencing hand on her shoulder. Well, I can't deny anything, but all of that is on dear old dad's head. I am not him. In fact, when I was home, I often made his life harder. At that, Weiss had a nostalgic smile on her face as she remembered those days. So the world knows me as Aries Schnee, but please, just call me Naruto. He held out a hand to shake hers with a genuine smile on his face. For her part, the Ravenet was conflicted now. Here she was, slamming the Schnee twins with the truth, and before her was the wayward son of the two, not acting like a spoiled rich kid. While rumors of his pranks did reach some ears, like those in the White Fang when they were peaceful, no one was really expecting to see a good side to the boy, especially after the incident where most of the world thought he died. Of course, the rumor mill was always spinning and often said he was alive, screwing with his father's head. People like that rumor more. Deciding to think it over, she put the vial of dust in his hand. Blake. She intoned before leaving. He was kind enough to give his, so she could be just as civil, right? Naruto sighed as she walked away. He figured he'd have an uphill battle with people once he fully came out of hiding. Seems he would just have to prove himself. That was fine. Turning to Red, he offered his hand as well after passing the vial over to Weiss. That is. I know my sister means well, but she can come off a bit strong sometimes. Give her a chance for me. I can do that, I am Ruby, by the way, Red replied shyly, but with more pep in her voice as she continued. Enough about that. Weiss finally exploded on him and started dragging him into Beacon. You need to tell me what you are doing here and why you choose to come out of hiding now. Well, for one, I knew you'd be here, so I wanted to make sure you were okay and spend some time with you out of our father's sight and reach, Naruto replied as he waved a silent goodbye to Ruby. She looked like a good kid, so he wasn't as worried about her, especially when the blonde from earlier was going over to greet her. They'd be fine. Right. How did you know I'd be here? Weiss asked curiously. She was happy to see him, of course. But he never made it back home, and so he shouldn't have known that she came to Beacon, right? You can thank Mom for that. Naruto replied with a lopsided smile. Mom knew you were alive and didn't tell us. Weiss nearly screamed in shock. Winter has been using Atlas resources to find you. Naruto scratched his cheek with a slight smirk. All part to the game to stay out of father's sight. Plus, it was fun leaving traces for her to figure things out. Pretty sure we'll see her at the Vital Festival this year. Weiss stopped them and embraced him once more, actual tears were welling up. I missed you. I really thought you died, especially when our connection cut out for a while and then came back weak. What happened? Naruto sighed as he comforted the girl. I can't tell you a whole lot. Mostly because my memory is a bit fuzzy of the whole thing on account that I woke up somewhere else entirely, but thankfully it was near Mistral. You can't remember? Naruto, Winter told me they found a massacre. We feared the worst or that you were held captive somewhere. Plus, there were reports of a massive horde of Grimm that hunters and huntresses had to wipe out before actually being able to go there and find out what happened. You are the only survivor. She cried as she pounded his chest. I know, Naruto replied with a sigh and a broken look in his eyes that Weiss felt was entirely out of place on his usually happy face. She found she really hated it. I get flashes, but because of that, I am not really eager to know the truth. And father got his prize. What do you mean? Why said after wiping her eyes and leading them in the building. Be gone, Naruto laughed a little at that while Whis had a hurt look. Again, I really should have kept in contact with everyone, not just mom. I am sorry. You're forgiven, but you are spending some quality time here with me. I want all that lost time paid back. Also, what did you actually find? Whis replied, she figured he stayed away from their father. Winter did it, Naruto did it, and now she is doing it. Naruto held up the hilt of his sword with a cheeky grin. The last remnant of a powerful warrior. So, I reforged it into something I can use. It was best not to tell her the whole truth yet. He honestly feared what she would think of it. Of him. Father sent you out to some ruin, only to find a broken weapon. Whis replied flatly. I bet this news would really rattle him. I love it. Oh? Am I rubbing off on you already? Naruto asked with a sly smirk. Vibe. Whis replied in kind. But I am serious about spending as much time as we can. Winter will for sure murder you for real at the Vital Festival. Good one. Naruto laughed. It seemed his sister hadn't lost her sly edge while he was away. Wait, real death? You sure about that? Whis just started walking away with a giggle. Whis. Oh look, Red's here already, Naruto said as they walked into the auditorium where orientation was being held for all the first years. That's right, Whis said quietly before her eyes took on a certain shine. I still haven't yelled at her properly. You're kidding, Naruto said flatly as she watched his sister go after Ruby. Apparently not. Observing Ruby with a blonde girl, he had to admit she was pretty cute before his attention was brought to a familiar voice. Ah great, where am I supposed to find another nice quirky girl to talk to? The blonde boy complained. Naruto shrugged and walked over to him while noticing a certain retard eyeing the blonde. Don't worry about that Chuck, Naruto said as he stood next to the blonde with a smirk when the boy jumped a bit at his sudden appearance. That was telling. Keeping being yourself and some girl should sweep you off your feet. Oh you're the guy that slept the whole time on the bullhead. The blonde replied with wide eyes before they clouded in confusion. My name's John. John Ark. Not Chuck. John was as tall as the schnee, with messy blonde hair and dark blue eyes. Naruto could just tell the boy didn't have much experience fighting, his connection to all things war gave a view in that. John wore a black short-sleeved hoodie with detached reddish-orange sleeves and a dark brown image of the bunny rabbit Pumpkin Pete trimmed in white with cute black round eyes. Whatever was on the hoodie though was obscured by a white diamond-shaped chest plate cut off above his lower abdomen and placed over his shoulders are a pair of white spolders with re-embraces set under them. Below, he wears blue jeans with a white patch placed on the left knee and black sneakers which have left and right written in black on the respective shoe soles. His weapon seemed to be a sword strapped to his left hip. Clearly, the boy wanted to be here for a reason despite his lack of skill, but maybe Naruto and a few others could subtly help him. After all, it was with teamwork that battles were won. Oh lighten up Chuck, Naruto replied with a cheesy grin at his own joke that took a minute for John to get, but there were a few that got a good laugh out of it. It was just a fun nickname, better than Vomit Boy. Anyway, nice to meet you John. Call me Naruto. That is a bit more tasteful. John chuckled nervously. So you don't mind talking to me? Nah, Naruto replied with a relaxed stance. I could honestly use more friends and you seem to stand out. I am sure we can help each other in the long run. Oh thank God, John replied. Growing up with 7 sisters made it a bit hard to get actual friends that weren't into them. I am just glad you talked to me, even though my mom says I need to have more confidence when I speak to people. She sounds like a smart woman. I'd listen to her. Naruto replied honestly. Sure, he was a mama's boy, but with a father like Shock, could you blame him? Then he heard his sister blowing it at making friends with a Ruby girl, but she did mention John as a cute boy they could talk about, getting said blonde's attention. A smirk crossed his lips, something if Y saw, she'd know there'd be trouble. Speaking of confidence, you could try at catching my sister's attention. You know, you're right. It would also be nice to have a girlfriend, so I just might. Confidence is key. John replied, psyching himself up for all the flirting he was going to do later. He, of course, didn't know of the flame that entered the white-haired boy's eye. He might be doing this a subtle prank on Whis and to further mellow her out, but if John ever broke her heart, there would be hell to pay. John also questioned the sudden chill up his spine. I'll keep this brief. A voice rang out, catching everyone's attention. It turned out to be Professor Osborne, the headmaster of Beacon on stage with another teacher next to him. Osborne was a middle-aged man with tousled silver hair and thin brown eyes. He has a light complexion and sharp facial features. He wore shaded glass spectacles and a small purple cross-shaped pin on the cowl around his neck. His outfit mainly consists of an unzipped black suit over a dark green button vest and green shirt. He also wears black trouser shoes and long dark green pants. You have traveled here today in search of knowledge to hone your craft and acquire new skills. And when you are finished, you plan to dedicate your life to the protection of the people. Naruto eyed the man on stage with a sense of unease. Like he had met the man before somehow and was wary of his power. Kurama also warned him to not reveal too much too soon to the man. That was fine with him. There was something odd about him. But I look amongst you and all I see is wasted energy in need of purpose, direction. You assume knowledge will free you of this, but your time at this school will prove that knowledge can only carry you so far. It is up to you to take the first step. Naruto had to admit that was a good speech, but he saw one of his friends scoff at his words. He knew that to her. Knowledge meant a lot. To her, knowledge and power kept you safe. Seems that while here, they would gain both, even if their past lives already gave them much. Doesn't hurt to get more. Ozpin quickly walked off the stage after that, he felt his part was done. So the blonde teacher next to him took center stage and continued for him. Naruto thought someone say her name was Glinda Goodwitch. Interesting, she didn't look like much of a witch. Instead, more like a strict explanation. He found that funny. Glinda seemed to be middle-aged too, but her age was more graceful as there were very little grays in her blonde hair, which was tied in a bun in the back, with a curl hanging down the right side of her face. She had green eyes that were covered by thin ovular glasses and teal earrings dangling on her ears. She had on a white long-sleeved pleated top that had a wide keyhole neckline and gauntlet cuffs that flare in pleats at the wrist. Her lower body was covered by a black high-waisted pencil skirt with bronze buttons and black fading into brown stockings. On her feet, she had black boots with bronze heels and a cape that was purple inside and black on the outside. The cut of the cape was stylized to end in flames and arrows, with a row of diamond-shaped bronze beads on the back. Above this line of beads appeared an emblem of a tiara that is her personal symbol. A lot of people had those personal symbols, his family included. Maybe, he could alter his later. You will all gather in the ballroom tonight, tomorrow. Your initiation begins. Be ready, you're dismissed. John, please tell me you are joking. Naruto pleaded as he looked upon John's nightwear. Seriously? Honestly. Okay, maybe he wouldn't bother to prank the blonde in the future because he was pranking himself. Why John didn't just wear a t-shirt and shorts to bed as most teens confused him. After all, his red shirt and black shorts were really comfortable. What? John asked as he looked himself over in his blue Odyssey with feet. These are my usual PJs and they were quite comfortable. John, look around, Naruto said as he gestured to the people all around them. They have different PJ themselves, but none have something to be worn by kids. I am only saying this to save whatever love life you wish to have. Thank you, Naruto, but I think it will be fine for one night. I have other PJs, but I thought this would be fine. John replied with a shrug, but even he saw that quite a few girls were laughing at him, and he wondered if he already ruined his chances with them. Despite his confidence, he would need to work on himself as well. That is good to know at least. Naruto shook his head before smiling when he saw one of his friends. The other two were probably off doing their own thing. That one of them was in the group of boys. Shaking his head, he led John over to the friend he spotted earlier today and honestly, his best friend. Hey Sid. The white-haired schnee called out. Caught in the middle of a silent conversation with who he knew as Blake, said boy turned his attention to him while Blake just stared. The boy was pretty lean and had tan skin like those of South America, showing he also got out a lot. Short black hair that was slicked back. His usual attire was taken off in place of a mint green shirt and black shorts. Oddly enough, he wore a yellow belt with black spots. Naruto. Good to see you are making friends, but I doubt he would survive even the gates of Mictlan. I didn't know you read the Aztec Hero as well. Seems your interest in my book is not just the person reading it. Blake replied with a curious tone in her voice. Honestly, she thought he had been flirting with her or something. The stories of others often interest me, Sid replied. That is why I was an actor back in Mistral. I got to experience the views and beliefs of others through them. However, I was in a bit of a rut until Naruto showed one day and strong-armed me into training to become a huntsman. Sid then turned to Naruto and John with a somewhat stoic expression. But I see why you introduced him to me. He will need all the friends he can get. I am Sid Evergreen, by the way. Come on guys, you make it sound like I'm socially awkward. John joked. You are, Naruto replied bluntly as he pointed at the boy's attire in a room full of teenagers. That was humiliation waiting to happen. But as your friends, it is our job to make sure you get on the right track. And as Naruto's friend, I will do my best to help him not corrupt you, Sid replied with a small smirk directed at Naruto, who squawked in disbelief. Turning back to Blake, who seemed to take interest in the both of them for a moment, he said, it was nice getting to know you Blake. I hope you will let me borrow that book when you are done. He paused for a moment, contemplating what he should do about her hiding her frantic nature. She probably had her reasons. Or if you even want to talk, just make sure the cat doesn't have your tongue. He winked at her and left with the other two boys. Blake blinked owlishly at that until she saw Sid's bell twitch. That threw her for a loop. Aries Schnee was best friends with a faunus. Huh, maybe he really wasn't like his father as after all. The rest of the night went pretty well. The three boys got along pretty well despite their distaste for John's nightwear. Naruto did keep an eye on his sister who slept with the other girls on the other side of the ballroom. Blake had been doing fine until Ruby and her blonde friend bothered her with something. Then his sister got into it with Ruby again. He would have to do something about that. He just didn't know what. As the commotion died down, he saw the blonde girl glance at him and wink. First thing in the morning, locker room. Curious thing, this chakra, you strangely remember, is, Kurama's voice rumbled in Naruto's mind as the youth discreetly experimented with the only aspect of the energy he seemed capable of managing at the moment with aura as he used shape manipulation to create a small, near-perfect sphere. I wonder how your future hunter peers and she will respond to the moment that attack is unleashed. I can only imagine. Naruto eventually stopped to look over his future peers Kurama mentioned. Like a certain orange-haired girl talking circles around a boy in green and Ruby and the blonde girl chatting idly by as his sister talked to a famous red-headed girl. He was pretty sure he observed one of her tournaments on his travels. She was pretty damn good but really needed to work on her semblance. She used it in a subtle way, but to him, she was squandering her talent. There would come a time when she needed it the most on a large scale, but would her control be enough? Only time would tell, but Kurama did state that she needed to figure things out quickly. This girl that Weiss was attempting to recruit to be on her team was none other than Pura Nikos. Her red hair was in a ponytail that spun down to her waist. In addition to having green eyes, she also wore light green eyeshadow. Her outfit showed off the muscles she no doubt worked hard to acquire. She wore a brown overbust corset with a vertical strip of lighter brown in the center. Additionally, Pura wore an elastic black A-line miniskirt and brown upper-length gloves on both arms. She wore a red ankle-length sash that wrapped around her skirt. As for accessories, there was a small circular bronze plate on her right hip opposite two pouches, with both connected to a belt. The plate bore her emblem, which was a spear piercing through a red background. Underneath her hair, she wore a brown circlet adorned with a pair of small green teardrop-shaped emeralds on thin chains. She also sported a large bronze gorget around her neck and a bronze bracelet on the upper half of her left arm. "John," Naruto called out when he noticed his friend looking lost in the locker room. Apparently, the boy forgot that he had put his stuff in the locker next to Sid's and his. "Over here, remember?" "Oh right," John replied as he scratched the back of his head before opening his locker to put his sword and shield that acted as the sword sheath. It was simple and did not have a gun form. Whoever was going to be on his team needed to be able to cover that slight shortcoming. "We will do our part to make sure you survive the initial test, even if we can't always be around," Sid started as he took out his weapon. A black cross-shaped kite shield with a white cross in the middle of the intersection. It looked simple but was also thicker in places to accommodate some surprises. Whatever team he landed on, he was the defense and long-range support. Sid had also changed out of his PJs. Now, he had on a pair of blue jeans, black running shoes, and a frosted mint green dress shirt under a black vest. Finally, his frontis feature was just a simple jaguar's spotted tail that he often had wrapped around his waist, so people often dismiss it as just a fancy belt, just like with his PJs. "Survive. Oh boy, if I land on your team, I will be grateful." John then eyed some of the girls and had a dopey grin cross his face. "I also won't mind being on a team with a beautiful girl that can also kick ass." "He's going to get eaten alive." Sid deadpanned as he watched John walk off towards Weiss and Pura. "We cannot let him near her." The white-haired Schnee brother just snorted. "She'd eat up the poor fool, that is why I doubt they will actually let him on our team. The same could be said for my sister and I know she wants to be on my team along with that Pura girl she is trying to recruit." "There is a possibility though," Sid interjected calmly. "I have read up on this school and their team making is part of the initiation test and there are 4 members. Beyond that, however, is as far as I got." "Any information we take into battle is good," Naruto replied with a nod before wincing as John seemed to strike out twice. Once being to blatantly brush off Pura for Weiss and then talking to her once Weiss denied him. It was slightly comical to see him pinned to a wall. "Wow, some real lady killer vibes I picking up from you." Naruto deadpanned when he helped the guy up. "Yeah, having some trouble there?" The blonde girl that was usually around Ruby interjected with some amusement. Now that they were up close, Naruto had to admit she was beautiful and projected an aura of confidence. Maybe she had some advice for John later on. Naruto noticed she was pretty tall like him, was fair-skinned with lilac eyes, and had long blonde hair that cut off near her butt, and she was rather ahem curvy, almost to the level of another friend he knew. She wore a tan jacket that showed off her midriff with golden brown piping and short puffy sleeves with black cuffs that featured 2 gold buttons. Underneath this, she wore a low-cut yellow crop top with her emblem, which seemed to consist of a black flaming heart on the left breast. For the lower half, she wore a brown belt covered by a pleated brown piece of material, reaching from hip to hip around the back of her waist, with her emblem emblazoned on the rightmost pleat in gold. Underneath this was a long, white asymmetrical piece of material reaching to her knee on the right side, as well as a pair of tight black spandex compression shorts that reach her upper thighs. She wore a pair of brown, knee-high boots and orange over-the-knee socks, with the right sock pushed down just below the knee. A gray bandana was tied around her left knee. Finally, it seemed her weapons were attached to her arms in the form of yellow bracers, which probably meant she was a close-range fighter of some sort. I thought confidence was key here. John groaned as Glinda called for all of them over the intercom. Usually it is, Naruto replied with a wince. But two things here. 1. Don't brush off the right deed and then come on to her when my sister denies you. 2. My sister can be picky. You really have to show her you are worthy of her time. Is that what we are calling it now? Ruby asked with some mirth in her voice, but 2 was also dripping with sarcasm. The white-haired teen chortled as he turned to Ruby. I'd say yes, you just need the right icebreaker. Oh, honey. Nice. The blonde girl throwing an arm around Ruby's shoulder. Stop that. Ruby protested in complaint. Thank you, said Naruto, so Ruby, intros. Oh right, this is my sister, Yang. Ruby suddenly said excitedly. Oh? Seems I am not the only one looking out for family here. I can respect that. Naruto replied, shaking her hand with a smile. Yang smirked, I did notice you checking us out earlier, cutie. Glad to see you were just looking out for my sister as you looked out for yours. I like that. The N-word said with a sultry tone. Right, Naruto replied somewhat awkwardly. Really, we both know someone worse. Sid deadpanned as he walked up to them. Yeah, but I am used to her. Naruto groaned before introducing his friend, well John here already knows him, this is my best friend Sid. Pleased to meet you, Sid replied with a small smile. But we should really get going. For years, you have trained to become warriors, Osmond stated as he stared at the group of first-year students, all in a line on the cliff above the Emerald Forest. The testing grounds to see if they had what it took to be huntsmen and huntswomen. He did see the slight flinch that John had and instantly knew that he would have to watch out for that boy, despite his transcripts. As many years having deduced that in an instant, however, he also secretly smiled behind a cup of coffee when he saw the male schnee patting him on the back. It seemed he already had people looking out for him. In the form of the infamous Aries schnee. Interesting. Today, your abilities will be evaluated in the Emerald Forest. Now, I am sure many of you have heard rumors about the assignment of teams, Glinda interjected her part as she held a datapad with which to observe the students in the forest. Osmond having his own in his non-coffee mugged hand. Well, allow us to put an end to your confusion. Each of you will be given teammates today. There was an air of excitement in many of the group, while a few showed their nervousness to the potential teammates. Naruto exchanged an unnoticed subtle glance with Sid and 2 others. These teammates will be with you for the rest of your time here at Beacon, Osmond stated as he noticed the various moods his potential students adopted. So it is your best interest to be paired with whom you can work well. That being said, the first person you make eye contact with after landing will be your partner for the next 4 years. This got a yelp of shock and dismay that went ignored. After you have partnered up, make your way to the northern end of the forest. You will meet opposition along the way, do not hesitate to destroy everything in your path or you will die. Naruto heard John gulp and patted him on the back, letting him know he was going to be okay. John had him, Sid, and oddly enough, Purah on his side. Despite John's earlier brush off of her, there seemed to be a small attraction there. Interesting. Maybe John had a chance after all. You will be monitored and graded for the duration of your initiation, but our instructors will not intervene. Osmond continued with a slight roll of his eyes. Honestly, it was always the same with new students. They were either super nervous like with Ruby or John, had a cocky attitude like with Yang and Carden, or were fully prepared for what was to come like the Schnee twins and a few others. You will find an abandoned temple at the end of the path containing several relics. Each pair must choose one and return to the top of the cliff. You will guard that item, as well as your standing, and we will grade you appropriately. Are there any questions? Yeah, sir. John started to ask but was quickly cut off. Good. Osmond continued as if he didn't hear the boy. Take your positions. John, you will be fine, Naruto stated as he patted the boy on the back as soon as various glassy platforms started launching people into the air above the forest. I wasn't expecting this. John freaked out. Someone will catch you or you'll get impaled on your way down. Naruto shrugged, much to his horror, well a few people found some humor in that. Purah shook her head while Yang just giggled before she winked at Naruto and Ruby and put on a pair of aviators and was launched into the forest. Happy landings. Naruto cheerfully called out after he and Ruby were launched, and then John was next, him screaming the whole way. Osmond took another sip of his coffee and just hummed. Of the various landing strategies, Naruto paid attention to a few. Like the crazy orange-haired girl using her hammer as a ride, her green friend hooking himself into a tree and then spiraling down, and Purrit using her shield to crash into trees to slow her descent and then shoot of her spear to impale John's hoodie to a tree. He was kidding about John being impaled. Well, at least he didn't have to worry about his blonde friend for the moment. Now, it was his turn to land. Noticing that Weiss was using her glyphs as springboards, Naruto decided to take a more casual approach. Putting his hands in his pockets, he created a series of glyphs of his own and casually strolled down to the forest below. He made his landing into the Emerald Forest look easy. Like he was taking a stroll through the park. As for Sid, he used his shield in a similar manner to Purrit, only he didn't blast through them. He bounced off various trees before using the last of Naruto's glyphs to land safely. The two best friends shared eye contact and smirked at each other. "Very well done, Sid," Naruto praised. "Compared to some of the other things we have done, that was easy," Sid intoned with a stoic look on his face. "I wonder how the other two fared." The other two that Sid mentioned descended into the Emerald Forest in a simple affair. As for who they were a pair of teen girls that looked ready for anything. One such was Ebony. Known to be very beautiful and had silky dark hair tied up in a long ponytail with her bangs perfectly framing her face. She had glossy lips and black eyes. She had a white shirt that barely seemed to contain her large assets, and the black bolero jacket with little golden snakes lining the edge seemed to frame them perfectly. Next, she had on a pair of skin-tight black pants that are partially covered up below the knee by red with gold trim knee-high stilettos. Ebony used her weapon's axe mode to slice into a few tree branches to slow down her descent, and then the partially detached wires of her guitar mode to swing safely down to the ground before ending in a gymnastics finisher pose as the axe fully changed to the guitar mode. The weapon itself was black with it outlined in red with white strings. She turned with a smile as Gwyn made her way down easily. Gwyn's green eyes are covered by frameless glasses, red hair cut into a shoulder-length bob style to deal with the heat of the desert with her old home in the desert. She wore a pair of back sandals, white shorts that showed off the sun-kissed skin on her smooth legs that went on for miles, a black shirt that covered her modest chest, and a white tasseled jacket that worked well with the modifications to show off the light tan wings that looked to belong to a hawker vulture that she used to safely land next to Ebony, where the two then locked eyes with Ebony smiling wide. "Are we ready to go?" Gwyn asked softly before they both noticed a small pack of beetles coming their way. "Once these dogs are taken care of, assuming that bitch doesn't have any surprises for us, then yes," Ebony replied with an energetic smile as she started strumming her guitar, generating violent sparks of lightning along the strings and sporting a slight blush on her cheeks. "Then let's take care of these and be on our way," Gwyn replied as she took out a white pole from her jacket and let it fully extend to a halberd with a large curved silver blade with a black edge. Gwyn started slicing into the grim with practiced ease while Ebony covered her from behind, playing the Wonder Woman theme as the lightning jumped from her guitar, frying the beasts it touched. All with an exuberant smile on her face. "What this part of the forest on fire before?" Naruto asked with wide eyes. "No," Sid replied shortly as he brought his shield up when he noticed a large pack of beetles still in the area. The moment the Grimm saw them, they instantly stilled as their red eyes glowed ominously. "This seems to be an accident of sorts. It would appear others don't have their version of teamwork down yet. Understandable, given we all don't know each other. I'll take it as a good sign that there are no bodies, but this stillness freaks me out every time, like she is communicating with them," Naruto replied with an uneasy look, despite him casually twirling around the sword hilt in his hand before taking hold of the unique rifle form made of hard light dust, with said hilt acting as the main grip. The forest shook as a roar of a great beast sounded out and the other beetles cowered for a moment. They parted submissively as a much larger creature made its way towards the front of the pack. It was far taller than the other beetles. Barely any of its fur was visible as thick bone-like armor covered its body and ended in massive spikes. This was an alpha beowulf. The leader of the pack, and it looked far older than any of its kind. The intelligence in its eyes calculating ways to defeat the two boys. Sid glared at the beast behind his shield before moving it to where the longer section was vertical, revealing a gun barrel. "Seems this test is one way for her to try and kill us again. Makes me wonder how long this one has been hiding in the shadows of the school." "Careful, you're starting to sound excited," Naruto teased as a whirring type sound began to emit from the rifle aimed at the pack of Grimm. "Please, these are nothing, just try and not be too theatrical until Ebony gets here." "I'd rather not listen to her complain," Sid replied in an almost bored tone. For now," the schnee replied with a grin before a blue beam of light blast outward. A sonic boom sounded off and in the next moment, a large trench was blasted through the pack of beetles. The beam traveled far into the forest, sounding off for all to hear. The result was half the pack dead with their leader's right arm obliterated into the nothingness. That railgun is impressive as always. Sid said nonchalantly as he started mowing down the now angry pack of Grim with his shield's Gatling gun mode, the rat-tat-tat covering Naruto's footsteps as he charged at the Alpha Grim with a grin on his face and the rifle returning to being a hilt, which was then led at a low angle. The Grim growled rabidly at the teen as it let its remaining claw crash down on the schnee, only for the boy to disappear from its sight and reappear behind it, a pale blue blade of hard light now extended. The next moment, the Grim roared out in agony as its remaining arm fell to the ground in a loud crash. Naruto grinned widely before backflipping onto a newly formed glyph and then rocketed off it to slice the big Grim to pieces and finally landing behind Sid, his back to the mayhem they created. That didn't take long. Sid replied flatly as he watched the Grim's body start to fade into nothingness. Let this be our war call. The schnee declared before both boys headed further into the forest, not knowing that something bigger had awakened. Ozpin was stunned at what he observed on his screen. There were quite a few talented students this year. However, two teams caught Ozpins. Naruto and Sid. Along with Ebony and Gwen. These two teams took down their opposition with practiced ease. He had been right to keep an eye on them. However, there was a familiarity he sensed with them. He couldn't place it and that bothered him. That was quite the attack, Glinda stated as she recovered from her own shock when she heard the sonic boom and had to search around for the source. It seems that an attack that powerful is a one-shot and needs to be quickly reloaded. It is a good thing for Naruto that Sid was there for him, or I fear Naruto would have been overwhelmed. Something tells me that wouldn't have been the case, Ozpin said lowly before switching the feed to Ruby and Weiss, his eyes taking on a soft look as he remembered teaching her mother as well. In any case, our last pair has been formed, sir, Glinda informed him. Nora Valkyrie and Lyran. Poor boy, I can't possibly imagine those two getting along. Still, he is probably better off than Ms. Nikos. I don't care what his transcripts say, that John fellow is not ready for this level of combat. I guess we'll find out soon enough. At their current pace, they should reach the temple in just a few minutes or sooner in other groups' cases. Speaking of which, what did you use as relics this year? Silence. Professor Ozpin. My apologies, I was caught up in memories. Ozpin replied with a grunt, seeing that Ruby and Weiss weren't really getting along. Switching the feed to Naruto's group, he answered. Chess pieces. When they said temple, I was imagining something more than just the ruins of one, Naruto stated flatly, with a hint of disappointment. The few structures we passed were nothing but ruins, Sid replied, his tail unwrapping to swing to show his amusement. I expecting nothing, but it seems we are the first ones here, so we get the pick of our choice. After us, of course, honest trash. A crude voice rang out as someone threw Sid to the side before walking over to one of the black chess pieces. More especially, the black bishop. Animals don't belong here. Naruto was pretty sure this jackass was named Cardin. He had burnt orange hair that was combed backward with a slight peak at the front and indigo eyes. He wore silver gray armor with gold trim. His chest plate sported a bird with its wings outstretched as his emblem. Underneath the armor, he wore a black shirt with red trimmings and black pants with a red sash tied around his waist. He also had on silver gray armored under the knee boots that matched the rest of his armor. And who are you to decide that? Naruto replied tensely as he helped Sid back to his feet, who wrapped his tail back around his waist, a snarl face at the trash and animal comments. The name's Cardin Winchester. You do well to remember it since my family is a big name in Vale, and I'm sure a schnee can have a better friend than a dirty animal. You don't want to go making friends with the wrong sort, so what do you say? Cardin asked as he held out a hand for Naruto to take. I think I can tell the wrong sort for myself, and you're the textbook definition, Naruto replied with a modicum of highbrow dismissiveness as he turned his back Cardin and went to go pick up the Black Knight piece. However, it was kicked out of his hand by another boy that had actually stayed hidden. Accounting to Cardin, he felt it prudent in case the animal attacked him. The one that had kicked the piece was another teenage boy that was built slenderly and was slightly shorter than Cardin. His head was shaved with a light green mohawk and he wore a hoodie with the sleeves cut off and two bracers on his arms extending from the wrist to just below the elbow. Those bracers had his silver-colored emblem printed on them. Beneath the hoodie, he wore a pale green, long-sleeved shirt and a brown strap around his chest, holding a spiked spalder to his left shoulder. He had on wore dark gray pants and his boots seemed to be made of a thick brown material and went up to his knees. Come on Schnee, you are far better than that. Are you really going to reject an offer like that? The boy sneered. Forget it Russell. Cardin sighed as he picked up the Black Knight piece and held it with a smirk. Little Schnee really fell far for the tree if you ask me. And I take that a compliment. Naruto responded, his voice taking on the air of threateningly composed, before dropping a pebble that ricocheted off a series of small glyphs that ended in painfully striking the hand that held the Black Knight piece, before using another glyph to catapult a piece gracefully into an open hand, while using one glyph to block the attempt to intercept, and I rarely get so few in relation to that stain on the family name I, unfortunately, have to call a father. Carden and Russell were about to make another attempt on the piece, but were stopped when a boulder appeared out of the sky in front of Sid. The large rock shattered in their direction, forcing them back. Once the dust settled, they saw what looked like a spike retract back into a slot that was nearly flush under a gun barrel aimed in their direction. Professor Osborn did say we were to destroy anything and/or everything that gets in our way, said Naruto conversationally, his voice not losing the edge of threatened composure, and while you two are not what he had in mind exactly, you still fall under that statement, and that boulder was only a warning. This is not over, said Carden as he and Russell walked away. I think waiting by that cliff for Ebony and Gwyn would be fine. No doubt Gwyn would want to think up a plan to return to the cliff that Osborn shot us from, safely. Naruto, that statement makes our headmaster sound insane. Sid admonished as they kept walking, but noticed a lot of leaves had fallen from the trees in this area. Odd. So what if it's true, all the best people are a little unhinged, Naruto replied with a shrug. HMPH, true that may be, I still think that we should respect him even if we are not his side yet. Sid started before he pointed at the poorly made leaf trap, snickering with Naruto as they walked around. The odd part about that hole though was the fact it was right near the cliff. Whoever dug this so close to the edge of the tree line and the cliff wasn't very smart. Sid's sharp eyes also noticed movement above and raised his shield just in time to defend himself and Naruto from some crudely made wooden spears that fell from the trees. I can't believe that didn't work. Carden angrily roared as he came out from behind a large tree facing the cliff. Really, you resorted to shit traps to get us back? Sid flatly asked, not impressed because they could quickly jump out at a moment's notice. What better way to trap a filthy animal and keep the riffraff out? Carden replied with an uncaring shrug. Now you are going to hand me that chess piece or else. This would be ill-advised, Sid replied as calmly as he could, his temper was rising way too quickly for his liking. Carden was really testing his nerves here. I doubt Professor Osborn would approve. I don't give a shit what Osborn thinks. Carden screamed at them with a rapidly reddening face. This is a prestigious school that shouldn't degrade itself with the faunus nor their supporters. Really? Demanded Naruto, you'd risk your stake at this school, Sid suppressed a groan at that pun, just to sabotage us. Naruto took out the chess piece and dangled in the air with a cheesy grin. That grin though was wiped off his face when from behind, a piece of wood knocked into his hand, causing the piece to fly out of his hand, then bounce off Sid's shield and fly above Carden's head, who tried to catch it with a triumphant grin. However, it flew a little too high, and as his fingers brushed it, he fumbled around until his foot hit a root and they both dropped hard. Carden's face paled considerably when he opened his eyes to find his top half was over the cliff and he watched the relic fall into the darkness of the gorge below. He let out a decidedly unmanly scream as Russell quickly helped him back up. He was about to yell at his partner but was interrupted by a fearsome roar from below. Roar. The call of a mighty beast was heard soon after, as the relic must have hit something down there and angered it. The ground shook as Russell fell on his ass and Carden struggled to stay on his feet. Since Naruto and Sid were not near the edge, they fared a little better. As the ground shook and a violent updraft pelted the cliff, the ground began to break and crack until the piece of land the two bullies were on started to slid downward, only made worse by the hole they dug. That is when they saw the red eyes and the claws of the beast as it tore its way upward. Oh shit man. Help. Russell screamed in terror while Carden tried to crab walk up the sliding piece of land with a silent scream etched on his face. This was something they were not prepared for. Should we? Naruto asked seriously as he put on a faux-thinking face. Sid rolled his eyes. Being a pathetic school year bully in your late teens is one thing, dying at the hands of some great and terrible grim is another. He said before stalking over to Carden, grabbing the back of his armor and throwing him to safety. Naruto sighed and did the same with Russell. Sid smirked lightly at being the better man and brought out this Gatling gun on mode on his shield and let off a few rounds, making the creature cry out as it slipped into the abyss below, but it was far from done with that, he just had a terrible feeling about that. Naruto noticed upon turning to face the grim with Sid that the two hapless fools who had solicited their help were not within his peripheral vision. Sorry, furry lover. Came the mace wielder's voice a distance away, you and your pet are going to have to do your best without us. Naruto, if I ever run into those two after they somehow survive this forest, I'm going to kill them on sight, Sid said casually with a slight growl as he and Naruto looked at each other in an almost nonchalant fashion. That was when the grim shook the land and it soared high above them and roared. And boy was this a big boy. The Grim had the head, wings, and talons of a large predatory bird and the rear legs, tail, and body of a lion or tiger. Like the alpha Beowulf, this creature showed its age, as most of the fur and feathers were coated in the bone-like armor and spikes all around its body, with some particularly wicked ones, the folds of its wings and the tip of its tail. On its bird-like skull, it had a bone-white beak and 4 red eyes, along with grey webbing on the sides of its beak. It roared angrily at them from the sky. Preaching to the choir and get in line, Naruto replied in a similar fashion, as he tossed his sword into the air to flip off the Grim and the idiots who ran off, before catching it again, after I'm done stringing them to a pillory, flaying them alive, ripping out their spines, and then beating them with said spines. Beating them with their own spines, said Sid, getting a weird look on his face, which was oddly matched by the Grim that got agitated by Naruto's crass gesture. That doesn't seem physically possible. That's what that goon sent by my crooked old boar to harass me said, replied Naruto with a somewhat sadistic smirk. Once again. Your father is a jackass. Sid sighed tiredly. I have known that for a while. So, the hell is this thing? Naruto asked as he stared at the beast with boredom, much to the beast's anger. It's a griffin. A soft female voice stated. The voice belonged to Gwyn as she and Ebony casually strolled onto the scene. I clotheslined the 2 cowards for fun on the way here. Ebony cheerfully stated. We heard their parting statements and I just had to. Also, why is there a Black Knight piece that is just like ours in one of its eyes? Gwyn asked seriously. Hardin thought it'd be funny if we failed, Sid groaned. Of course, the one they needed was part of the beast that was angry at them. Also, thank you for the parting shot at them, Ebony. Oh. My pleasure. Ebony replied in a seductive voice as a light dusting of red coated her cheeks. I have sent a shock to their systems too. She scares me sometimes. Sid replied lowly to Naruto. So how are we going to kill this thing? I am sure it is tired of us ignoring it. A louder roar confirmed that statement. We hit him hard and fast with style, Naruto replied with a playful grin on his face. Ebony, give us a beat. That style being theatrical. I love it. Ebony cheered before she started shredding on her guitar, sparks beginning to fly. Please play The Phoenix by Fall Out Boy. Put on you war paint. Naruto sang loudly as the griffin did a loop in the air and then tried to drag him down in the gorge below. Tried being the keyword here because as he started to fall, he created a black glyph that stuck him to the side of the cliff and with a wave of his sword, now infused with a bit of fire dust, in the other hand, unleashed a barrage of seekers. You are a brick tied to me that's dragging me down, strike a match and I'll burn you to the ground. We are the jack-o'-lanterns in July setting fire to the sky. Here comes this rising tide, so come on. Naruto laughed as he played with the creature. He stopped the fire and when the Grim went to attack, he wasn't there anymore. Looking down, the creature squawked in shock before Naruto sprung up from a wind glyph keeping him in place and used a form of hand-to-hand combat that came from one of his scattered memories. Rising wind or something, but the point was he kicked the Grim back up the cliff and on the ground. Put on your war paint. Crosswalks and crossed hearts and hope to dies. Silver clouds with grey linings. Ebony sang exuberantly as she started hacking at the bone armor with a not-so-nice grin before electricity burst from her axe-wielding arm. The guitar strings in that form detached from her arm and started to wrap around the Grim, inducing violent arcs of lightning to course through its body. So we can take the world back from a heart attack. One maniac at a time we will take it back, you know time crawls on when you're waiting for the song to start so dance alone to the beat of your heart. The Grim roared angrily in defiance as it shook off the strings and took to the skies again. It may have bitten off more than it could chew with these teens. It thought it heard its brethren fighting off more kids, so it started to fly away. It could use their help. But first, it had to dodge the shots of violent wind from the flying girl. Fascinating, Gwyn stated as she peeked out from behind the sniper rifle's scope that was also her halberd. Your sense of theatrics seems to always be on point and it is driving the creature to flee. Gwyn analyzed, a bit amazed that her leader could be like this and still act like a normal person. He was an enigma to her, which was part of the reason she continued to deal with him. But I am not singing. Ditto. Sid sighed. He was adept at legitimate theater, not impromptu music videos. Ah, no biggie, just try and keep up. Naruto said before using his glyphs to summon 2 small Nevermores for Sid and Ebony to catch a ride on, while Gwyn simply took off using her wings. He simply used his glyphs to make larger jumps, he was more or less walking among the birds. The chase was on. You must be joking. Glinda asked flabbergasted, watching the datapad of Naruto and his team chase after the high-level Grim that had their relic in its eye while singing and soaring through the air. My, this year will certainly be entertaining, Ozpin responded behind a cup of coffee. However, if one were to look closely, there was slight panic in his eyes as he observed this group's teamwork. The way they moved was more like seasoned hunters and huntresses. Then there was this feeling he couldn't shake off. Like he had seen scenarios like this in the past, not to mention the high-level grim that shouldn't be in his forest. More like a year of headaches. With that Ruby girl who is 2 years younger than everyone, that spastic Nora girl, and now this group of crazy kids. I don't know what is worse. Glinda groaned, knowing they were all going to be a handful. Of course, you would come up with this idea, Weiss replied flatly as she used a black glyph to keep Ruby in the makeshift slingshot they made with Blake's weapon. They had trapped the Nevermore, chasing them in a bit of Weiss's ice against a much larger cliffside. Think you can make the shot? Ruby asked as she readied her large scythe crescent rose. HMPH, can I? Weiss stated smugly, but Ruby actually questioned her in her naivety. Can yo? Of course I can. Weiss snapped before sending her partner off towards the large Nevermore, Ruby using sniper shots from her weapon to speed herself up and hook said scythe under the beast's neck and then sticking to the side of the cliff thanks to Weiss's glyphs that aided the girl into slicing the head off as soon as she got to the top, like an inverted guillotine. Do you hear that? Yang asked Blake after staring in awe at her little sister for a moment. But what she heard was a bit distracting. Yeah, it sounds like a lot of gunfire and singing. Blake deduced, drawing attention to her from Weiss, while Ruby, up on top of the cliff, looked bewildered at what she saw. Even John's group, who were looking in awe at what Ruby and her team did, were distracted by the new arrivals. Hey young blood, doesn't it feel like our time is running out? Naruto sang out with a cheesy grin on his face as the griffin squawked in surprise to see that the Nevermore it was going to recruit for help was now headless from a bunch of newbies. It had seen a lot of them as of late in this forest and had killed a few, but mostly stayed hidden until today. Her word was law. Kill the nightmares, she said. Well, these brats were nightmares alright and probably its end. Why was the white-haired one bouncing all over the place and cracking its armor? I'm gonna change you like a remix. Then I'll raise you like a phoenix. Wearing our vintage misery. Ebony grinned wide as Sid and June distracted the beast with hails of gunfire, so as she continued her guitar riff, she used her lightning manipulation to completely disappear, herself and the summon. After a moment, she appeared to strike a deadly bolt of lightning into the beast's chest, further shattering the bony white armor. No, I think it looked a little better on me. I'm gonna change you like a remix. Naruto said as he decided to freefall below the stunned Grim. Many thought that his aura levels were low and were running to catch him, none more so than his flabbergasted but worried twin sister. However, none of his teammates did. Gwyn always knew he had some insane plan to defeat enemies like this, so she wasn't worried, just intrigued on how he would do it this time. The white-haired male Schnee smirked to himself as he landed on another glyph directly below the griffin and braced as the barrel of his weapon's rifle form was aimed skyward at his team's prey, his free hand pulling out a single vial of fire dust, subtly infusing it with his aura and an intended shape he had in mind. Only Naruto, glad to have you back, Wai said wistfully to herself as she watched her brothers showboating. He could give Ruby a run for her money, who really just thought the whole thing she was seeing way awesome. Nora, in all her chaotic nature, had to agree, and as for a certain blonde, she really just impressed with it, just as she had been with her sister. With his hair covering his eyes, he sang the last verse. Then I'll raise you like a phoenix. The railgun sounded after he threw the vial between himself and the griffin, destroying the glass of the vial and mixing the unleashed dust into the trail of the rail shot. The ancient Grim was torn through by the railgun blast before it was engulfed in roaring flames and effectively burning it both inside and out. The scene from all around looked like Naruto had created a phoenix out of the now burned to a crisp Griffin Grim. Russell Thrush, Cardin Winchester, Dove Bronzewing, Skylark. Professor Osborne called out to an auditorium full of students. He was announcing the teams that had passed, but he would keep an eye on this one because he knew they were going to cause issues with their negative worldviews on the faunus. The four of you retrieved the Black Bishop pieces. From this day forward, you will work together as Team CDNL, led by Cardin Winchester. The boy just looked stoic at the announcement, but Osborne hoped that by putting Cardin in charge, he would grow to be a better person. Up next, a ragtag group of teens walked up to the stage, and he was curious about how their time here would help them. John Ark, Lai Ren, Per Nikos, Nora Valkyrie. The four of you retrieved the White Rook pieces. From this day forward you will work together as Team JNPR, led by John Ark. Osborne gained a small grin at the shock the blonde boy produced on his face. John may not have much experience fighting, so forcing him into the role of leadership could prove to help the boy in his career. He had seen it before in a few other students, and it usually worked. Congratulations, young man. He stated with a small grin, especially when Purr gave him a good-natured punch top the arm, which knocked him over. Lake Belladonna, Ruby Rose, Weiss Schnee, Yang Xiaolong, Osborne called as the four girls came to the stage, and he was getting a bit more excited here, mostly because he had a soft spot for Ruby, thanks to her parents' team. He did feel bad, after all, they all lost Summer Rose. The four of you retrieved the White Knight pieces. From the day forward, you will work together as Team rwby, led by Ruby Rose. Once again, he saw the shock on their faces that they would be led by someone so young, especially Ms. Schnee. He had his reasons, selfish as they may be. And finally, Aries Schnee, Sid Evergreen, Ebony Ward, Gwyn Lakis, Osmond said as he called on the last group, and this was just as interesting to him as Ruby's team. He did feel a strange connection, but he still could not remember why. Still, the group theme felt right. Plus, he saw as the room quieted down as he gave them Naruto's birth name. 2 Schnees in one school, with the male having been thought dead. Oh yes, very attention-grabbing. The 4 of you retrieved the Black Knight pieces. From this day forward, you will work together as Team Ages, led by Aries Schnee. He did notice that they didn't seem surprised by this information, but still were happy nonetheless. The strange teamwork led by Aries was certainly unique. Looks like this will be an interesting year, Osmond said whimsically. After all 4 of these teams were unique in their own ways. Carton's being stiff and rigid with old world views. John's being unfocused but with high potential. Ruby's playing to his nostalgia. And Aries is playing to his curiosity and their strange musical number of a fight just to get their relic piece. Gwyn subtly glared at her leader and Team rwby's leader as they goofed off in Professor Port's lecture about himself. While the man was merely a blowhard, his exploits in battle gave her ideas on battle tactics that she could always use. She was just baffled that he could go on and on about himself and not pay any attention to his class, while also seemingly hitting on the younger females like Yang and Ebony for example. This man was barely a teacher and thank God that he only took his flirting to minimal levels that included talking about himself. She concluded that she would barely learn anything in his class. But she was not the only one annoyed with their antics in class. Weiss, having grown up with Naruto, was used to his antics, but also dealing with rubies was another thing entirely. She just could not fathom how the girl was such a child and acted like it to a fault. And to be made her leader of all things. As a Schnee, she expected to be the leader like her brother, who could take things seriously when it suited him. But to completely pass over her? Unacceptable. In the end, the Beowulf was no match for my sheer tenacity, and I returned to my village with the beast in captivity and my head high. Celebrated as a hero. Professor finished his story with a bow, expecting all the students to applaud him. Nothing but crickets. Ungrateful brats. The moral of the story? Professor Ported asked, not even noticing how steamed Weiss was getting at Ruby as he continued. A true huntsman must be honorable. A true huntsman must be dependable. A true huntsman must be strategic, well-educated, and wise. So, who believes themselves to be the true embodiment of these traits? Weiss held up a hand while angrily saying, I do sir. Well then, let's find out, Port stated sternly as he revealed a cage with a small grim inside of it. Step forward and face your opponent. Weiss nodded and made her way to center stage, her team all cheering on, most notably Ruby, even if that seemed to annoy her. Ruby? I am trying to focus. Weiss snapped. That caught Naruto's attention as he frowned. He had noticed that something had been bothering her since the teams were made, and he had a feeling he knew what it was. Especially when she snapped at Ruby like she used to do with Whitley when he would make fun of her dream to be a huntress. Want me to talk to her later? Sid asked quietly. While he may not be the leader, he was second in command to their team and took that seriously. Everyone had a part to play on a team, and that was still important. Naruto was quiet for a moment as he watched her lose her sword for a moment because of Ruby just cheering her on, but she actually took the younger girl's advice in the way she killed the beast. No. Naruto replied after a moment. I think she'd be more receptive if it came from me. If you say so. Sid said with a shrug as class was let out. Weiss? Ruby called after her teammate as she stormed out of the classroom. What? Weiss asked, highly irritated that her team leader was coming after her. What's wrong with you? Why are you being? What's wrong with me? What's wrong with you? You're supposed to be a leader, but all you've done so far is be a nuisance. Ruby snorted at that. What did I do? That's just it. Weiss blew up. You've done nothing to earn your position. Back in the forest, you only acted like a child and you've only continued to do so. Weiss, where is this coming from? Ruby asked, genuinely shocked and saddened that her teammate was being like this. What happened to all the talk about working together? I thought you believed in acting as a team. Weiss gained a cold look. Not a team, led by you. I've studied and trained. And quite frankly, I deserve better. Osmond made a mistake. Ruby looked despondent at that as Weiss walked off in a huff and it made her question herself at that. Maybe Weiss was right. Was she cut out to be a leader? Now that didn't seem to go very well. Osmond's voiced as he appeared, walking down the halls with a cup of coffee in hand like always. Is she right? Did you make a mistake? Ruby asked quietly. That remains to be seen. Osmond replied in a jovial manner, trying to lighten the mood. Naruto sat on the terrace, overlooking the school to see a beautiful sunset. He was enjoying the sight as it reminded him of other lives. In every instance, he would think about what to say in different scenarios, and this time was no different. For a moment, the schoolyard took on the shape of a small village in the hustle and bustle of twilight. Odd. Naruto? What are you doing out here? Weiss asked, surprised to see her twin where she had come to know that Professor Port came after his lectures. She was going to go to the blower to get some advice and maybe feel better. Instead, she found her brother here. Waiting for you, sis. Have a seat. Naruto replied with a soft smile as he continued to view the sight. When she sat down, Weiss knew that silence meant he was thinking, and she wasn't always sure that was a good thing. But she had to speak up or he might get the wrong idea. I should have been the leader. She huffed out, almost sounding like a child. Naruto actually chortled at that. Come on, now you are sounding like Whitley. What do you mean? Ruby asked. I mean, it's only been one day. Ozpin replied kindly, but he really felt his age as he explained, Ruby, I have made more mistakes than any man, woman and child on this planet, but at this moment, I would not consider your appointment to be a leader to be one of them. Do you? Excuse me, we both know how bad that brat can be. Weiss shouted, offended by that comparison. Then you know where I am going with this, Naruto replied flatly and without emotion, catching her off guard. We also both know that we didn't get everything we wanted while growing up, so this instance, I figured you'd be more mature than Whitley, and truth be told, being a leader is not all that it is cracked up to be. I really wish I wasn't appointed leader. Now, this threw his sister for a loop as she looked at him in a new light. Being a team leader isn't just a title you carry into battle, but a badge you wear constantly, Ozpin explained further. You are not always performing at your absolute best, then what reason do you give others to follow you? Naruto looked into the sunset going through a myriad of memories to serve as examples of all the times when one had or needed to be a leader. He had seen both sides. As a leader, you need to learn from the mistakes of others, not just your own, and grow from that. Ruby is young and she will make a mistake here or there, but it is her job to be that pillar of strength for her entire team, and if someone on the team makes a mistake, it will be seen as her own. Naruto then got to his feet and turned back towards her with the sunset silhouetting him, making Weiss's eyes widen as he held out his hand to help her up as well. In a way, I have seen both sides to this coin, so instead of acting like a spoiled rich princess who did not get her way and expecting those in power to see the rights from their wrongs, i.e. like Whitley, be that other pillar of strength for Ruby. Like Sid is for me. Be there for her and reassure her when she needs it, and the same will happen for you. You are on a team now, Weiss, together, you will do greater things than what you could do on your own. Weiss took his hand and he pulled her into a sudden hug that made her blush at their closeness for just a moment before smiling and leaning into it, especially when he followed up, because, in a way, they are your second family, something ours really should have been. You've been burdened with a daunting responsibility, Ozpin said as he turned to go back to his office. I'd advise you to take some time and think about how you will uphold it. Ruby nodded as he left, thinking about how she was going to be as a leader. As she absent-mindedly walked to the balcony that Naruto and Weiss were at, she smiled gently when she saw Naruto comforting her and giving her a big hug. Something she saw that Weiss enjoyed as her home life had been rather cold. She was happy that they got along enough for him to comfort her like that. Growing determined, Ruby nodded to herself as she walked back to her dorm as she had a lot to think about. After all, she wanted that relationship with her partner and teammate, one where she could be just as close to Weiss and help her when needed. All of her teammates for that matter as Yang and her already sort of had that relationship. Thank you, Weiss replied as she let go of the hug at the same time he did, both twins smiling brightly at each other. For explaining that view on it. I missed having you around to calm me down and helping me view things in a different light. And no matter how far I am, I will always be there to help you, Weiss, Naruto replied gently. After all, we are still family, thanks to our shitty sperm donor, we are there for each other. Weiss snorted in an unladylike manner at his odd way of saying that Jacques was their father, she had missed that too. I am glad you're back, but never compare me to Whitley ever again. I won't. Naruto giggled at that, knowing she hated being compared to their brat of a little brother and that it usually got her to think better. He waved by as his sister left to go do her homework but also smirked when he heard someone else walk up next to him. Man, you are a good older brother, Yang said. She punched him in the arm good-naturedly. Here I was coming to tell Weiss off for yelling at my sister. I try, Naruto said after rubbing his arm and then looking around them exaggeratedly. He brought a hand up like he was telling a secret. Don't tell anyone though, I am the younger twin. I'd just like to get ahead of that game. Yang snickered at that. Come on then little bro, let's get something to eat, I am starving after those boring lectures. Sid saw this from afar and smirked to himself. Later that night, Weiss walked into their dorm to see Ruby passed out on her bed from obvious studying. It seemed that Ruby was trying to take her studies seriously not only for self, but for her team as well. Naruto was right, she just needed to work with Ruby on some things. Nudging the girl awake, Ruby started to word vomit. Weiss. I was studying and then I fell asleep, I'm sorry. Weiss just shook her head and stopped the girl from talking any further with a hand over her mouth. The white-haired girl, knowing her leader would continue. Noticing a small thing that could bring them together while studying, she asked, how do you take your coffee? I don't. Answer the question. Weiss replied, noticing she wasn't getting the reason behind her question. Ah. Cream and 5 sugars. Ruby spouted off. Weiss rolled her eyes at that before going to get that. Here. Thanks, Weiss. Ruby replied with big eyes, still really confused since she had just woken back up and Weiss was being nice to her compared to earlier. Weiss looked at Ruby for a moment and then nodded to herself. I think you have what it takes to be a great leader, but just know, I will be the best teammate you can have. Ruby beamed at that. But the answer to that question is wrong, so let's work on that, Weiss replied as she observed Ruby's answers and begun to help the girl. After a while of studying and correcting Ruby's mistakes, she decided to say something that brought them together a bit more. And just so you know, Naruto and I always wanted bunk beds as kids, but father was rather adamant that it not happen. So, thank you. From their beds next to them, the pretending to be asleep Yang and Blake smiled to themselves that Ruby and Weiss were finally getting along. Days later, Naruto watched with a heavy frown as John got his ass handed to him again in combat class by Carden. The fact that Carden kept lording over John and his failures was starting to really piss him off. Carden already proved to him that the Winchester was nothing but the schoolyard bully. Naruto knew that would get him nowhere in the real world at most. The white-haired boy figured Carden would just become some bandit that picked on the weak instead of actually helping people. Are there any others that wish to display their combat skills? Glinda asked the assembled students after that rather quick fight. She wanted a better example to show the student body for the upcoming Vital Festival that was coming in a few months. I'll do it if only to beat Carden's winning streak. Naruto replied as he jumped on stage and patted John on the shoulder as the tired boy got off. TCH, defending the weak too, I should have figured, furry lover. Carden taunted, making many students frown and start to root for Naruto if they already weren't. Well, someone has to knock you down a peg again. Naruto replied nonchalantly, not even bringing up his unique blade. Well then bring it on, Carden replied with a cruel smirk. Make daddy proud. Naruto replied with a thoughtful expression as the audience grew quiet at that. Many wondered if that really was a sore spot, while Weiss cringed. Naruto did not care what their father thought about him. Nah, why would I want the pride of someone who doesn't love me? Carden really didn't know how to respond to that. Shaking his head, he smirked. Well, you may have survived that crazy-looking Grim, but you won't survive me. You fight for those that are weak. Think so? Then how about this? I will give you one free shot, but I am warning you. If you waste it, Naruto taunted back only for Carden to charge up to him and slam his mace right at the schnee's head. His only result was his head moving barely an inch, and that made a lot of people hold their breaths. Heh, you're going to regret it. What the hell? Carden asked, genuinely confused. Please, you couldn't actually land a hit me, Naruto replied before grabbing the shaft of the mace and then palm thrusting Carden away from him, the mace now in his hand before he threw it away. I don't even need Crystal Clarion to beat you. You think you're so cute? Carden grumbled as he got back up and wiped the dust off his armor. Bitch, I'm adorable, Naruto replied, getting quite a few people in the crowd to laugh. Arg. Carden lost his cool as he grabbed his mace and charged at Naruto. With each swing of his mace, Naruto merely moved away from the mace, keeping his smirk plastered to his face. Carden slightly regained his senses to say, you're not even fighting me. Naruto frowned. Oh but I am, you're just disappointing. Maybe if you didn't waste time hating on others and picking on who you consider weak, you'd have a fighting chance. Carden took the bait yet again and swung his mace with all his strength. A 1Y and 2Y and a you know what to do Y. Naruto laughed out as with each swing, Naruto ducked under just to throw him off balance. With the schnee using a knee to knock Carden backward. Ugh, can I get a moment? Carden groaned, panting as he tried to catch his breath. Sure you can. Really? You're not ha only for Carden to be uppercut and land on his back with Naruto stomping on his chest for good measure. Carden barely registered when his scroll went off, signing that his aura was down. How quickly bravado goes out the window when you are flat on your ass. This made many in the audience to blink rapidly as they could count on one hand how many times he hit Carden, none more so than Yang, who was decent in a hand-to-hand fight because she was a brawler. So how hard did Naruto actually hit Carden? Yes well, that was fairly educational, Glinda stated, not caring that Carden was laid out on his ass. She already had to deal with his shit against the faunus and weaker students on a daily basis, so she had little sympathy for him. Now remember everyone. The Vital Festival is only a few months away. It won't be long until the students from the other kingdoms start arriving in Vale, so keep practicing. Those who choose to participate in the tournament will be representing all of Vale, but I am sure most of you will be fine. So there we were in the middle of the night. Nora narrated dramatically while the rest of the group of JPR, rwby, and Ages listened on with varying degrees of interest as they ate their lunch in the lunchroom. She had Ruby, Ebony, and Yang's full attention. John was digging at his food as he was upset for losing to Cardin, and Purr was nervously splitting her attention between Nora's story, Ren's correction, and John sulking. It was day. Ren said, being the straight man to her crazy story. Naruto snorted to himself with a small smirk, while Weiss rolled her eyes. Gwyn, Sid, and Blake were not even paying attention at this point, too engrossed by their respective books. We were surrounded by Ursea. They were beelds. Dozens of them. 2 of them. But they were no match and, in the end, Ren and I took them down and made a boatload of money selling Ursa's skin rugs. Nora cheered victoriously. Ren sighed as he explained to the ones that were still listening. She's been having his recurring dream for a month now. Gwyn looked up from her book and said, some dreams do have symbolism, but for you, I think there is a scarcity. John, are you okay? Purr finally just came out as said, catching Naruto's attention as he focused on his friend, who he noticed had been a little off today. Sure, Naruto beating Cardin so easily did make him feel a little better, but he was still down about it. Huh, yeah, why? Don't look that way to me. Naruto commented, getting a nod from Ruby. I am fine, John said when he took notice that his friends were worried about him. So he put on a fake smile. See look. But that was interrupted when they all heard Cardin loudly laugh at a bunny-eared girl that they knew to be called Velvet. She was quiet but nice. The idiot and his team seemed to only get away with things because 1, there weren't any teachers around and 2, her team wasn't there yet. If Coco saw them, they'd be dead men walking. This also seemed to visibly worry John that he was next, and Naruto was slowly becoming more and more pissed off as he listened to Cardin mess with the girl and listened to Purr to get him to confess that John didn't like getting bullied. But John was too prideful in a sense because he didn't want his friends getting involved. On the other side of this, Weiss was cringing and slowly backing away. This was because when Naruto got mad, things got a little chaotic. The group suddenly froze in fear when they felt an oppressive force weigh down on them, and then a second later, the entire room felt it and froze. They all had a fearful deer in the headlights look that spoke of pain, but as soon as Naruto stood up with his hair covering his eyes, that oppressive atmosphere quickly lifted and the group's eyes were on him. 4. Naruto screamed joyously as he pulled a golf club and some golf balls from somewhere. After seeing this, Naruto's team shrugged, having been used to the oddities he could produce. Sid merely took a sip of his drink, June rolled her eyes and focused on her book with a small smirk on her lips, and Ebony. Well, she leaned back and had a big smile on her face, eager to see what her team leader planned on doing. As for the others, they had to duck as Naruto sent the golf balls in 4 different directions and ricocheted off many surfaces before lodging themselves in the asses of Team CRDL, making each boy scream out before falling down, clutching their butts in pain. Poor Velvet was unsure how to react, but a certain hyperactive orange tea did. Yeah. Break their asses. I think I speak for a lot of people here that I am sick of your bullshit, Cardin. Naruto replied in a deathly quiet room, most not believing in what they were seeing. Team CRDL simply groaned in agony as they slightly stumbled out of the lunch hall, using what they had on their persons to shield their backsides, although they did get in a quick flip of the bird at Naruto before leaving. This was followed by a bewildered yet appreciative applause that had Naruto bowing in response. As he sat down, he made eye contact with Sid and made small series of subtle hand gestures that ended with the numbers 3 and 2. This caused the Jaguar Frontes to gain a brief deadpan look before he got up and left. Teams RWBY and JNPR gave some curious looks that Naruto did not answer, other than a knowing smirk and whispered, "You'll see." A few hours later and in the middle of class, the PA system came to life with Sid's voice being projected from it with, "Let go of my tail, please." Students and faculty barely had time to exchange confused looks when Cardin's voice followed after a series of unpleasant chuckles, "I don't think so, you mangy cat. If you don't I'm going to have to get rather unpleasant," Sid warned. "And if you so much as raise a hand," replied Russell, "it'll be our word against yours." "I won't need to," Sid replied coolly, "a few words from me in the right places and I can easily destroy whatever reputations you have, especially with things like being sexual deviants and playing jump rope with the sexual orientation fence." "Ha!" Dove guffawed, "and what proof would you have to make such slander stick?" While not really publicized, certain Frana's features have an embarrassing secondary function of being erogenous zones, or as an equivalent to certain body parts that one doesn't generally display to the public, Sid explained with a flat clinical tone, such as tails like mine in Cardin's hand, which is the equivalent to having my junk being fondled. So I'll ask again, let go of my tail, please. There was a long awkward pause before Cardin responded with, that's bullshit. Really? Sid replied, a tinge of humor entering his voice, and yet you are still holding onto my tail as if you like the idea. Cardin gave a cry of disgust followed by a scrambling sound. You act disgusted, and yet you have the audacity to call my partner and team leader a furry lover and sexually harassing assaulting Franas like myself, Sid commented with an edge of humor, or a certain rabbit Franas from earlier. Which I might add, according to some female ones, their ears are equivalent to their breasts. So whose words would be against whose again? Hang on Cardin, said Lark, a frown evident in his voice, I'm hearing this weird echo shit. How are you using the PA system now and how much did everyone hear? Since the instant Cardin grabbed my tail, Sid replied, the only place that the system wasn't turned on was a certain area of the school where I provided such a tempting target. You baited us here? Demanded Russell. I don't willing or normally volunteer for crass things such as this, Sid explained, but if it helps in putting you creeps in your place, the discomfort from your bisexually deviant actions will have been worth it. And that's not the best part. Best part? Said Dove questioningly with a hint of fear. Ahem, Sid cleared his throat before singing out, I just wish that CRDL was dead. The whole academy then shook as almost all students seemed to loudly sing in response, put a bullet through their head. What the hell? Said Lark, panic in his voice. The mind that brilliantly orchestrated this little thing is both awe-inspiring and terrifying, Sid responded with a tint of sad feelings in his voice. I have no idea how they managed to hack the PA system and plant a little subliminal suggestion into the minds of so many people in such a short amount of time. Who would be crazy enough to go so far? Asked Cardin, dread leaking through his confidence. The same one who will set up an unpleasant end for you all if you step even a sliver of a pinky toenail out of line, Sid replied with veiled menace, and the worst part for you four. You and your enders will never know when it happens. This has been a truly unpleasant conversation, gentlemen. I'm now going back to class. I suggest you do the same and perhaps watch your backs while you still can. The rest of the school day, Team CRDL was given a plague carrier's berth, along with looks of mockery and disgust, some ridiculing them with words like deviants. At least until teachers like Professor Goodwitch cracked the whip to end the chaos. As for Team CRDL themselves, aside from creeping paranoia at their fellow classmates, they now had to live with a shameful stigma that'll haunt them for a really long time. Ah, oh most sweet and truly glorious ambrosia of retribution, Naruto sighed out with deep satisfaction, pouring out a drink that he and his team all found a taste for and sharing a toast. How sweet and beautiful thou art, let me count the many ways. Here, here, said Ebony as all 4 team members clinked glasses and sipped their drinks, you never failed to impress in being the master class of revenge pranks. It is my gift, Naruto responded with a chuckle, and my curse. Too soon, Gwyn replied simply with a flat look. John, walk with me. Naruto stated casually, but there was an air of demand there that he and a few others noticed on their way out of class. Sid had a look of understanding in his eyes, and he walked on with a slight smirk before engaging in a conversation with Blake. There was one person that decided to subtly tag along if a bit out of sight to make sure nothing bad happened to her teammate. Okay, what's this about, Naruto? John asked. A long while of silence between the two boys, stopping in front of a thought-to-be-empty classroom. They couldn't entirely be sure, but the one who taught in that class usually kept to himself. He was a new teacher after all. Be truthful, how did you get into this school? From what I have observed, you don't have a lot of experience fighting in general. Naruto asked with crossed arm and a piercing gaze. He wasn't judging John, he just wanted the truth here. What are you asking that for? John laughed nervously as his eyes shifted side to side, looking for an escape route. Just answer the question. Naruto demanded, his eyes flashing red for just a second, and it made the hairs on the back of John's neck raise up, but John merely thought the eye thing was a trick of the light, as scary as it was. Well shit, Naruto got him cornered, and it made him freak out for just a moment. But now that he thought about it, how could it not be obvious? He was the least skilled of his classmates and it showed, usually when Cardin bullied him or outright beat him down in mock combat. Damn, I really don't belong here. I never said that. Naruto replied quickly. I mean, it is true because of the way I got in. I faked some transcripts just to get in here at Beacon, I never earned my spot at this academy. John admitted painfully. I didn't even go to some combat prep school. So, you lied your way into this school. Why would you do this? Naruto asked evenly, still not showing any emotion on how he felt about that. He just wanted to know why the blonde before him wanted to be here so badly that it could potentially get him killed. Because this is always what I wanted to be. John exclaimed, pleading his case. My father, and his father before him were all warriors. They were all heroes and I wanted to be one too. I was just never good enough. For a while, there was silence as Naruto closed his eyes, seemingly in contemplation on how he would deal with John. However, that wasn't the case as John's plight brought an echo of sorts to his mind. Kurama would call it a memory and it sounded fond of that for some reason. An echo about some kid wanting the respect of his village. Naruto snapped his eyes open in another piercing gaze that froze John in place. So you lied to get into this school all to become what your blood wants, Nae screams at you to be. I can accept that. Naruto's gaze softened at that as he smiled at his friend. And what kind of friend would I be if I didn't amount? I don't know. That was rhetorical, John. Naruto deadpanned. Staring this afternoon, you and I will work on your basics and help build you to what you should be. And I am sure there is a certain someone who would be willing to do so as well. Huh? Who? Naruto kept the flat look on his face and he pointed his thumb backwards. A certain Redeed eavesdropping on our conversation. That certain Redeed let out an eep at being caught before walked out from behind said corner and awkwardly waved at the two boys. Hello. Purr? John asked a bit shocked. You would want to help me as well. Of course, you're my teammate and partner, that is why I am here. Purr replied honestly with a soft smile. Naruto did catch on to something and smirked from his position. Eyes, are you sure? John asked shell-shocked. At their nods, I don't know what to say. Just say thank you. Naruto replied as he walked over and put an arm around the blonde's shoulder. No longer will you be the lovable idiot who hides in a tree as his friends fight for their lives. You'll be the lovable idiot leader who can kick ass, knowing we each have the other's backs, believe it. Hey. I am only messing with you. Naruto laughed, getting the other two to laugh alongside him, but he inwardly wondered where that phrase came from. His attention then went to Purr. I want to help you as well, with your semblance I mean. How do you mean? Purr asked, genuinely confused. First. Naruto started while holding up a finger. Since I have a feeling, I know what it is, we will be using it to correct the mistakes in John's stance, since muscle memory is everything. He then held up a second finger. The other will help you in controlling bigger objects and to hold more since I have a feeling that you have issues in the control of that area. Purr's uncomfortable stance but grateful smile was telling. If you don't mind. A new voice rang out from the seemingly empty classroom, making the others freeze in place with awkward smiles on their face. A man walked out, whom they indeed knew to be the new teacher. Mr. Rhodes. He was a tall, dark-skinned man with dark graying hair and brown eyes. He wore a Prussian blue shirt which was covered by a bronze and navy blue vest, alongside straps over his chest and arms. Rhodes' left shoulder was covered by a bronze pauldron. His most notable feature was the scar across his face, not doubt from a bladed weapon. When students would ask about it, his eyes would gain a heavy sadness to them and wouldn't answer. I would like to partake in your training. You are much like Ms. Nikos, an all-around fighter. I wish to cultivate that. However, the very act of him going out to offer his assistance made him look downright uncomfortable and they wondered what the story behind that was. 2 weeks later, Naruto found himself in the forest of Forever Full with the rest of their class and they were being led by Professor Goodwitch and the kind Professor Rhodes. They were an odd combination to have on this trip but it did seem to work out for that. It really helped that the two got along and there were always some teachers who could not. And since Professor Rhodes usually wasn't the one to talk much outside of his own classroom, he let Professor Goodwitch handle that side of things. Yes students, the forest of Forever Full is indeed beautiful, but we are not here to sightsee. Professor Peach has asked all of you to collect samples of the trees deep inside this forest and we are here to make sure none of you die while doing so. In addition, Professor Rhodes is the survival studies teacher, so he would be the one to point out the best spots to do this. Rhodes did seem uncomfortable at having all eyes on him, but sadly, that was how he always was. Beacon Academy was known for having some of the best huntsmen and huntswomen, but the best usually came with quirks. For example, Port being a bloward, Oobleck running on coffee and going a million miles an hour, and now Rhodes, who was the shyest old man around. Each of you is to gather 1 jar's worth of red sap, however, this forest is full of the creatures of Grimm. So be sure to stay by your teammates. We will rendezvous back here at 4 o'clock, have fun. Glinda stated cheerfully before Rhodes and her walked off not too far away, but they didn't want to be in their way. After a while of collecting some sap, John gagged on the air around the jar and then sounded stuffed up. I had no idea that I was allergic to this stuff. There was a pause as he went to sneeze and held the jar away from him and sneezed in the other direction. When he looked back, the sap was gone with a smiling Nora in front of him. Nora. Why? Because this stuff tastes like syrup. Nora exclaimed like that explained everything. Sadly, it did, as in addition to being a pancake fiend, that came with syrup too. They once saw her drink an entire jug of the stuff before going off to drag Naruto to another prank. They had become prank partners after she figured out it was him that set up Team CRDL. They were a match made in hell, and it didn't help that Yang often cheered them on. While Nora was sap stealing from her team, no doubt draining the forest of the stuff, Naruto and his team were content with their supply. Well, most of his team. Strangely enough, Sid had an aversion to this stuff as it got on his tail. I did not think you'd be the one to have issues here. Gwyn observed. Yes, well, Sid replied uncomfortably, there were some in Mistral that really didn't like me, and once you threw this stuff at me. It got all in my fur and it took weeks to get it all out. Gwyn sighed. Yeah, I can see why that would be an issue. It would damage my feathers a lot. You see, that is why I lived alone in my neck of the woods. You learn early on what you can and can't do. But it seems I can get away with a lot here. Ebony replied cheekily, remembering the crowd of boys tending to her every whim. It was interesting. A nice change of pace from what she had to deal with before her team was formed. But we should hurry to seal these. The sap is known to attract wild animals and some grim. Speaking from experience. Yang asked from her spot next to her team as they strolled by. The blonde girl then smirked at Naruto as he tried a taste of the stuff and found he couldn't get past the smell and chuckled to herself. Ebony saw the small interaction and wondered if her team leader and the blonde of Team RWBY had a thing for each other. She knew what attraction was and saw there was pull there. She wondered if she should get involved there. You could say that it is very conductive for some reason. Ebony replied with a frown before shaking her head and looking at the blonde. Hey Yang, Naruto has yet to actually get some of that sap himself. Know any good spots that Nora hasn't eaten yet? Strangely, Ruby has been able to keep Nora away from our spot. Come on, Naruto. Yang replied excitedly, grabbing hold of Naruto's shoulder and practically dragging him away before he could say anything. I saw that. Sid deadpanned after Naruto and Yang were out of earshot. So, Ebony smirked. There is an attraction there, I am just giving it a jump start. And here I thought you'd end up with him. Gwyn replied with a raised eyebrow. Nah, I am having too much fun messing with the love-struck crowds, rather not make our leader jealous over that. Ebony replied with a big smile, getting the two frontas to roll their eyes. Yang leaned against a tree that Naruto managed to get some sap from. Unlike John's team, they kept a close eye out for Nora and her antics. As Yang observed her friend getting his share of sap, she had to admit he was cute. Yes, she was a bit boy crazy and had to admit that a few girls like Ebony for example, did catch her eye. Hey, she admired both sexes and had to point out the hot ones on impulse. Strangely, she was more attracted to Naruto as a person since meeting him. He looked out for his sister, her sister, and all their friends, John being a big example of this. She mostly looked out for her sister and kept an eye on the horizon for her mother, so to her they were similar. Protective of siblings and had parental issues. Well crap. Naruto stated, interrupting her thoughts. Looking down at him, she nearly burst out laughing. Naruto managed to overflow the jar and get his hand stuck in the hole where the sap came from. Boo boy, what sap? Seems like you're a bit stuck on that tree. Yang made a pun on impulse and was surprised when she saw his eyebrow twitch and a lopsided smirk formed on his lips. I've been in stickier situations than this, especially during the 4 years when I branched off from my family for a bit. Naruto countered. He had puns to counter hers. Now she just wondered how far she could take this before her teammates groaned. I can't even begin to imagine leaving someone like my sister behind. Yang responded with a glance towards Ruby. You do seem like the kind of sap who values family as I do, Naruto replied chuckling and Yang soon followed, albeit with some exceptions. Oh yeah, but I can't leave you alone, you seem to have a hard time dealing with this. Yang chuckled as she watched him try and yank his hand out of the hole, only to find resistance. The sap was quickly hardening. Some help might be required. I don't want to stick around and get eaten by Nora. Naruto replied with an unsure grin. Would Nora do that? Maybe. Too bad you didn't get your hand in a different sticky substance. I can think of one that wouldn't dry out as quick and would be more fun, especially if you eat it in the right way, you get more, Yang replied as she grabbed his wrist and pulled alongside him, but gave him a flirty smirk. On the other side of things, Ruby turned to Weiss and Blake and asked, she means watermelon, right? That juice never ends and is always sticky. Blake had a red face as she tried to come up with an answer for the innocent girl, though she wasn't sure how with a sister like Yang. Weiss on the other hand was used to puns from both Naruto and Yang, but wasn't prepared for when they both went with it. There was a loud crack and Naruto and Yang fell on their ass before laughing. Naruto took a look at their now joined hands that were covered in sap and only saw bits of bark here and there. It gave him any other idea for a pun. There are no twigs attached, don't think I could handle the sticks, just the bark. Then you are lucky this wasn't a dogwood tree. Yang laughed before that flirty smirk came back when saw they were both connected by the sap. But dogs don't just bark, they lick too, and that would be a good way to get the sticky stuff off. After all, it is edible, don't you think? Nope. Weiss cried before she shot a small bolt of ice to freeze the sap to be brittle enough to just crack and fall of them. Wow, nice job Ice Queen. Yang groaned. She was glad they let it go as far as it did because she was starting to see some of the gears in Naruto's head starting to turn. Sexual puns were hilarious and it was a good way to gauge people on how they were. Naruto smirked at her and then rubbed the back of his head and laughed, made her think he was taking things in stride while trying to match her was great. Aw, I wouldn't worry about it. Naruto replied to keep the mood light, but thanks for the Yang. Yang just smirked wider, especially when Weiss got redder. Wait, why did Weiss get mad? The sap was edible. Ruby interjected again with her innocence, causing Weiss's face to get super red and Blake to laugh nervously. However, it was Blake who noticed the thing sounded off in the forest. Say, does it seem quiet to you? Blake asked aloud, catching everyone's attention. You know, it does, Yang replied with a quizzical look. You think Team CRDL is up to something again? No doubt, Naruto grumbled. I did see Carden trying to throw a jar of sap at a tree for some reason. That complete Weiss frowned and it deepened when she heard screaming and a roar, moron. He attracted a grim, didn't he? Yang deadpanned. At Carden's girlish scream, Ruby ordered Yang and Blake to go get the professors just in case. Meanwhile, John had made his way to where the members of Team CRDL had run from, but Carden was missing. Honestly, he didn't like that guy, but not even Carden deserved to be killed by the Grim here. Seeing what was attacking him though, made John freeze in place for just a moment, asking himself if he was ready to go into direct combat. Sure, he was getting help from Naruto, Purrit and Rhodes, but he still felt that fear of not being good enough. With another loud roar, it sealed his resolve. Well, Naruto did say our mettle is tested in the heat of a real battle. John said to himself as he defended Carden from a strike of a claw that would have nearly killed him. This was the scene Naruto and company saw and it made him smile. John really was doing well after just a few weeks of tutoring. To most, it was surprising to see John doing so well after failing a lot. However, Naruto saw something else. The blood of a warrior finally awakening. He's doing well. Rhodes said quietly from his spot next to the schnee, making the others jump a bit at him just appearing there. Yes, but there are still small mistakes he is making, Purr replied, using her semblance here and there when needed, which wasn't a lot. To be expected, Rhodes replied before his and everyone's eyes widened comically at what happened next. In the heat of the moment, John managed to throw off the claw that would have torn him a new one. In the creature's imbalance, John raised his sword up high, going for a downward strike to try and take out an eye or something. But the oddest thing happened. He glowed white for a moment before that went to his blade, and in that powerful downward strike, it created a wave of white that split the Grim in half and left a trench in the ground. Fascinating, Naruto observed with a gleam in his eyes. One that Professor Rhodes caught onto. If we could help cultivate that, he would have a bit of long-range support in place of a gun mode that he doesn't seem fond of. It was nearing time for the famed Vital Festival, something that Naruto knew his sister adored as she had made time every year to watch it. This is why he wasn't surprised when Weiss took him and their teams down to Vale to check out the upcoming events and how the town was preparing for it. After all, it wasn't just Beacon that dealt with all the new students. The city of Vale found that they could make a profit off all the tourists as well. Walking the streets of Vale made Naruto smirk. Well, the upcoming Vital Festival seems to be underway. Naruto stated with a shrug. This is absolutely wonderful. I love this time of year. Weiss shouted out in joy with stars in her eyes. Wow, I haven't seen you smile this much Weiss unless Naruto is in the room with you. It is kind of weirding me out. Ruby replied nervously. How could you not smile? A festival dedicated to the cultures of the world. There will be dances, parades, a tournament. Oh, the amount of planning that will go into this event is simply breathtaking. Weiss gushed while marveling at the stands being set up and the few people that were early. You really know how to make a good thing boring. Yang replied in a bored tone. In a sense, I find the Vital Festival to be fascinating as well. Sid replied as he made his observations. If only for the stories to be told. Always in for a good story. Ebony grinned, ignoring some of the passers-by gawking at her. But I know the real reason Miss Sunshine is here, scouting out the competition. You can't prove that. Weiss replied defensively. Wynn rolled her eyes. You leading us to the docks is proof enough. The students from Vacuo are supposed to arrive today. Ugh, they smell like fish. Ruby complained. Yes, but for some people, fish is a delicacy, Gwyn replied while Blake glanced her way, both smirking. Still, I do agree with Weiss on observing the newcomers. Knowledge is power here. Way to take the fun out of it. Naruto sighed before he and Ruby noticed a dust store all blocked off by police tape. What happened here? Ruby asked a detective scoping out the place. Robbery, second dust shop to be hit this week. This place is turning into a jungle. A bearded detective stated in a bored but also exhausted tone like he was used to this already. This is terrible. Yang replied. They left all the money again. The other detective groaned out, making Ruby pay more attention because it sounded like the situation she had been in with Torchwick as the cops continued to chat about the subject in broad daylight with civilians in listening range. They must be tired, especially when they let slip they thought it could be the White Fang. HMPH, the White Fang. What an awful bunch of degenerates. Y sounded out, making Naruto cringe, while Blake, Sid, and Gwyn stared at her. As for Naruto, he had forgotten that their father often blamed the White Fang for a lot of things and that it seemed Weiss picked up some of that attitude while he was away. What's your problem? Blake asked with hostility in her voice. After getting to know Naruto a bit, she liked that Schnee because of his best friend relationship with Sid, who was also a Faunus. Did that mean Weiss had an issue with all Faunas or just the White Fang? Either way, she wasn't happy. My problem? Weiss asked, generally confused before shrugging it off. I simply don't care for the criminally insane. The White Fang is hardly a bunch of psychopaths. They are a collection of misguided Faunus. Blake argued defensively. Misguided? They want to wipe humanity off the face of the planet. Weiss argued back with a frown. So, they are very misguided. Blake corrected but did not defend that point anymore, getting curious eyebrows from Sid and Gwyn. They weren't sure how to deal with the two girls fighting over this. Plus, they were just uncomfortable about this whole situation. Either way, that still doesn't explain why they would rob a dust shop in the middle of downtown Vale. Blake's got a point there. Ruby interjected, besides the police never caught the Torchwick guy I ran into a few months ago. Maybe it was him. I take that bet. Naruto offered, making Sid scoff. The Jaguar Faunus knew to never bet against his team leader. That's a sucker's bet. Ebony groaned out, having learned the hard way. She still hadn't financially recovered from it. That still doesn't change the fact the White Fang are a bunch of scum. Weiss interjected her opinion again, making Naruto silently scream at her to stop. Those Faunus only know how to lie, cheat, and steal. That's not necessarily true, Yang said, wondering where this side of Weiss was coming from, while noticing that out of all her friends, Blake seemed to be the most pissed off. It was odd to her that Sid and Gwyn weren't as mad. But as if to prove the rich girl right, the universe threw her a bone. Hey. Stop that Faunus. A voice rang out from the nearby arriving boat at the docks. This once again caught the group's attention and they rushed to the docks to see something amusing. There was a blonde monkey boy running from the crew. They watched as he hung from a nearby lamppost with his tail, loudly responding to someone calling him a no-good stowaway, that he was actually a great stowaway. Getting a better look at him, they saw that in addition to being blonde, he was fairly tan-skinned, as if he had been out in the sun a lot, and his blue eyes sparkled with mischief as he laughed like a little kid when he threw the peel of a banana he just ate at the nearby police officer for a distraction. He wore two red wrist bracers over black fingerless gloves and an open loose-collared white jacket with no shirt underneath, displaying his muscular physique. He also wore blue cargo pants tied up with a white belt, had white bandages on his legs underneath the pants, and has a chain hanging from the belt loop on the right side of his pants. On his feet had on a pair of black and yellow sneaks. Finally, he had a necklace around his neck with a gold pendant that had a monkey emblem on it. On his run escaping the authorities, he passed by the group. When he saw Blake, he gave her a wink, but as his eyes passed over Gwyn, he gained a panicked look before quickening his pace and hightailing out of there, nearly letting out a scream of terror. Well Weiss, Yang replied with some mirth in her voice, you wanted to check out the competition, and there he goes. Quick. Weiss shouted excitedly, we have to observe him. Yes, let's. Gwyn replied with a way too creepy smile that scared her team. Do you think she knows him? Naruto asked Sid and they ran to catch up. Judging by how annoyed she seems, there is little doubt in my mind that she doesn't know him. Sid replied before a shiver ran down his spine, making his tail twitch. Naruto noticed that and felt a pit of dread forming in his stomach. I just hope she isn't pissed off to unleash that foul-tempered beast. It has been 3 years, let it go. Gwyn replied way too sweetly, making the whole group sweat. No. He got away. Weiss cried out after she tripped over something and falling. This was enough to bring Gwyn out of her state of sweet annoyance and look at the scene in amusement. Weiss. Naruto replied with a somewhat awkward chuckle when he noticed that it wasn't a something his sister tripped over, it was a someone. Someone that looked oddly familiar for some reason. Ah. Weiss replied in horror that she knocked someone down so easily. Salutations. The someone replied enthusiastically. That someone was a girl with short and curly orange hair that was cut just short of her chin, and to top that off, she had a hair antenna and a pink bow behind her head. The orange tea had bright green eyes, light skin, and freckles. She wore an off-white old-fashioned styled off-the-shoulder blouse with frill-detailed trim and frill-flared cuffs that half covered her hands alongside copper button detailing on the lower parts of her sleeves. She also sported a short grey pinafore dress with golden trim on the hem, alongside 4 light green stalagmite-styled stripes on the lower half of the dress, 2 on the front and 2 on the back, accompanied by 2 matching colored circles above the tips that had a stripe that ran around her waistline, with golden outlines, and a detachable black and light green collar. She also wore a pair of black thigh-high leg pieces that seemingly were attached to black shoes. The leg pieces had a single green stripe up the sides that appeared to light up. Hello. Ruby replied awkwardly since this girl was just chatting them up while still on the ground. Are you okay? Yang had to ask. I'm wonderful. Thank you for asking. The girl replied cheerfully, still not getting up. It made them all feel a little more awkward. Rolling his eyes, Naruto walked over to her and held out his hand. Here, let me help you up. The girl looked from the hand that was offered to the face it belonged to before her eyes widened and a gigantic smile appeared on her face. Instead of taking the hand that was offered, she instead shot up and hugged him tightly. Naruto. It is a delight to see you. The girl joyfully announced, much to his and everyone's confusion. Have we met before? Naruto asked, a bit uneasy now. Nope. The girl replied cheerfully, still not letting go of the hug. Stalkerish much? Yang deadpanned, much to her team's amusement, but they were still wary of the situation like Naruto's was. Interesting, you look familiar, but I don't know you. Naruto commented thoughtfully, his unease with the situation dissipating as he racked his brain to figure out who this girl was. Oh, that is because we have just met, but father told me a lot about you, Penny replied as she let go of him. My name is Penny Polendina. Wait, Weiss replied with wide saucer-like eyes since she knew that last name and what she just learned didn't compute. What? Naruto replied with shock before a giant smile of his own formed and he hugged the girl back. Uncle Pietro finally got you built. Is someone going to explain or what? Yang asked aloud, her red eyes showing that she was very confused and kind of pissed off. Oh right, Naruto replied, scratching the back of his head in embarrassment. As a kid, I would often go to Pietro's lab when the man I am forced to call father became too much even for me. At that, Weiss nodded quietly to herself and had an uncomfortable look on her face as she held the back of an arm, something that Blake took notice of. I grew attached to him and started referring to him as uncle. I spent so much time in his lab that I learned a lot about technology and he even showed me the initial draft for what Penny would look like. That explains a lot about his technological savvy. Gwen deduced, her eyes once again analyzing her team leader. He once said he learned enough about technology to be a threat and now she understood. So wait, he built his daughter. That make more sense now, Weiss replied with a nod. Yup, I am combat ready. Father even gave me some of his aura. Penny replied. That explains a lot. You have Pietro's childlike tendencies for sure and you are basically a new person all around. Naruto deduced. That. Ruby's voice rang out to the group, making them look at her and chuckle nervously at her shaking form before she ran up to Penny. Is so cool. You think so? Penny asked, tipping her head to the side. Absolutely, Ruby cheered. I now have a friend that is all mechanical. She turned to Naruto, she is mechanical, right? Yup. Naruto replied, taking amusement to this, especially when he noticed Penny's wide-eyed look. Friend? You called me friend. Am I really your friend? Penny asked in awe. And her father said it would be hard making friends outside of Naruto. Well, if you don't mind. Ruby replied nervously. She was still a socially awkward girl, so she hoped she wasn't making any wrong choices here. Sensational. Penny threw her arms up and cheered. I now have an uncle and a friend. You and I could paint our nails and try on clothes and even talk about cute boys. I am more into weapons, to be honest. I made my own scythe after all. Ruby replied somewhat lamely. Even better, Penny stated with stars in her own eyes now. I am combat ready, we can analyze all the weapons that will be used in the upcoming Vital Festival. Oh my god, there are 2 of them. Yang cried out in fake horror. Honestly, she was just glad her sister was gaining more friends. It is incredibly cute. Ebony stated, not getting the joke as she gushed. Penny seems far more coordinated. Weiss replied with a roll of her eyes, but does this mean you are fighting in the tournament for Atlas? Indeed I am, I also wanted to meet my uncle, Penny replied cheerfully as she hugged Naruto again, making him laugh and Weiss to smirk. Naruto had always been good with people. I guess that means you have no idea who the monkey-tailed riffraff was that we were chasing. Stop that. Blake blew up, remember her earlier anger at the female schnee. Stop labeling him as some degenerate. He has a name. Which we did not learn. Weiss replied, wondering where this rage was coming from again. Actually, Gwyn interjected, making everyone's attentions turn to her. His name is Sun Wukong, and he is a degenerate. Huh? Blake got out intelligently, losing some of her steam as she stared wide-eyed at the girl who she knew as a faunus, clearly not understanding the situation. Care to share how you know him? Sid asked, genuinely interested. You never mentioned him. Because it never came up before. Gwyn countered before sighing and gained an annoyed look on her face. He was one of my friends back in Vacuo. He was one of those guys who would flirt with any girl he saw in his line of sight, but one day he just disappeared. I am guessing he didn't flirt with you, Yang asked. Not after I made him fear me, Gwyn replied with a grin that made their skin crawl. After that, he calmed down and became my best friend before he disappeared out of nowhere. I guess that makes sense for him, Blake grumbled, not happy that one of her points was taken away. Shaking her head, she rounded back on Weiss. But this still doesn't explain why you are so discriminatory when Sid and Gwyn are right here, and especially about the White Fang. Because Naruto and I are victims of this new White Fang. Weiss shouted back, shocking Blake, but not for the reason you'd expect. New? Blake asked intelligently. Of course. Weiss exclaimed like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Sid mentioned that they have been under new management for years now, and I know him and Gwyn are not bad people. I just hate this new White Fang. At this Blake had wide eyes, not knowing what to say. You want to know why I don't particularly trust the faunus that do join the more violent version. Because they have been at war with my family for years. War, as in actual bloodshed. Our grandfather's company has had a target painted across its back for a long time now, and ever since we were kids, we had to watch family and friends disappear, board members executed, and an entire train car full of dust, stolen. It made father violent towards us and made him so desperate that he did the one thing I just cannot forgive him or the White Fang for. Weiss whipped tears from her eyes at this point. And it resulted in that massacre 4 years ago. Where I believed I had lost my brother. Weiss, I'm sorry. Blake sorrowfully replied and cringed a bit to herself when she saw Naruto put an arm around Weiss's shoulders to comfort her, only for more tears to fall. Blake knew Naruto was important to Weiss, but didn't know the extent. Seeing it now, it made sense. Jacques was just a horrible person in general, especially if Naruto had to be a shield for Weiss. It is okay Blake, I get they were tired of being pushed around, Weiss replied after a moment with a small smile, figuring that Blake was understanding her side a bit more now. But you know, I actually respected the old White Fang, Blake's yellow eyes widened comically this point. Back when they were led by someone kind. I saw they were making headway in places, and I respected them for it. Not to mention you had the biggest crush on their leader at the time. Naruto snickered, making everyone nearly fall on their asses. Way to ruin the moment, Weiss sniffed through a huge blush, but had a smile on her face. I need to take a moment. Blake replied with an unsure look on her face, especially at the last tidbit of information. I'll come with you. I saw a cafe not far from here if you want to talk, Sid replied, walking to Blake's side and offering a hand. After a moment, she took it and they walked off. Now that we know Weiss doesn't hate all faunus, Gwyn stated stoically before that creepy smile returned to her face, along with the air around her being uncomfortable. I am going to find that monkey-tailed degenerate and teach him an old lesson he won't ever forget again. With that, she spread her wings and took to the air. They all became immediately worried for Sun, even if they didn't know him personally. Weiss, do you want to join Penny and me for lunch? There are a few things I want to run by her, but I want to make sure you're okay. Naruto asked. I'll be okay, I am not hungry, Weiss replied after giving him a tight hug. Go be a good uncle. Oh. I will join you. I have ideas as well. Ruby suddenly stated as she zipped over to Penny and then dragged the both of them away. You're surprisingly okay with Penny. Ebony said after a moment, noticing it was just her, Weiss, and Yang now. Hey, we have human, faunus, and now sentient machines, I am over it, Weiss replied with a shrug. Besides, I trust that Pietro did a good job. Speaking of faunus, Yang replied with a teasing grin, one that made Weiss know where this was going and made her groan. Yang, the white-haired girl warned. You had a big old crush on the old leader of the White Fang, Yang replied with a teasing smile. What made little Weiss so enamored with him? Weiss had a big blush on her face now. Both out of embarrassment and anger. He was big, strong, and part cat of some sort. Plus, he was super smart, so can we please move on, or should I get Naruto back here so you can date him now instead of later? Wah. It was Yang's turn to have a red face. She hadn't fully realized that she was that into him yet. Ladies, I have a better way to spend our time instead of bickering senselessly. Ebony injected by placing her arms around both of them. Shopping. Weiss then gained a glint in her eye that any father would dread as she pulled out a little plastic card. With that, the three disappeared. I figured you'd want to talk to a fellow Franus before you revealed anything too big. Sid started off as he and Blake took sips of the tea they bought. He figured it would be a good way to keep calm. Share away. Blake sighed as she looked at the Jaguar Franus. He had been rather nice to her since coming to Beacon. They'd often talk and share things about their lives, but she had always gave edited version because of obvious reasons. She learned that he was an aspiring actor in the theater district of Mistral, but often went to speakeasies for the youth of that kingdom to try just about anything. He often pondered that if that was the gateway to Mistral's criminal underground, even though he would just try the new alcohols that were made. Because of that, she felt more comfortable telling him about her life. It just made sense. I was a member of the White Fang. Sid nodded as he took another sip of his tea. I thought as much since you had been really defensive. But it was the way you were defensive that caught my attention. Blake cocked her head to the side at that. What do you mean? Nodding, Sid elaborated. Since I have been to Mistral speakeasies, I can safely say that I have seen more than a few violent outbursts. Typically, from that of the new White Fang. They usually get into brawls instead of verbal spats. That makes sense. Blake replied uncomfortably, having seen that side before. However, Sid replied with a softer tone of voice and small smile directed at her, your verbal spat with Weiss is to be expected from the daughter of the old White Fang's leader. Blake turned red at that, you know about that. There are not many Franus who don't know about Gira Belladonna, to which you share the family name. I may not follow the entirety of the goings-on in the White Fang, but I do know of him. I didn't. Sun suddenly said from not too far away, cowering under a table. Both feline Franus couldn't help but blink at his interruption. How long had he been under there? More importantly, what are you doing under there? Blake asked. Oh, you know, scraping gum off the underside of these tables for a quick profit. Sun replied nonchalantly, but as a passing bird shadow crossed over, he gained a panicked look. Come on, I am hiding from death itself. I wouldn't go far as to call Gwen death, Sid replied quietly. She's just really good at what she does, but what she does is not always friendly. I feel like you're referencing something, but I have no idea what, Sun replied blandly before turning back to Blake. Still, the White Fang's leader is your dad. Talk about high profile. Yes, and because of that, I have been a member for most of my life. I was born into after all. Blake explained, smiling a bit at the nostalgia, but then remembered the recent times and why she left made her frown come back. Back then, things were different. In the ashes of war, the White Fang was meant to be a symbol of peace and unity between the humans and the Faunus. Of course, despite being promised equality, the Faunus were subjected to discrimination and hate. Humanity still thought of us as lesser beings, and so, the White Fang rose up as the voice of our people. And I was there, I was at the front of every rally. I took part in every boycott. I actually thought we were making a difference, and maybe we were with our generation and younger if Weiss's words hold true. Believing that my closest friend is a schnee. Sid stated, you're not just being an optimist. Naruto respects them and I am glad to see that Weiss does as well. Thank you, Blake replied with a small smile before she continued. But then Dad stepped down mostly out of pressure. This gave way to the current leader. A new leader with a new way of thinking. Suddenly, our peaceful protests were being replaced with organized attacks. They were setting fire to shops that refused them service. Hijacking cargo from companies that used Franus labor, and the worst part was it was working. We were being treated as equals, but not out of respect, out of fear. I am guessing you left because you're here now instead of the White Fang, which is no longer what your dad made it out to be. Sun inquired. Correct. I decided I no longer wanted to use my skills to aid in their violence. Blake replied seriously, but couldn't help but find Sun's position a little humorous. Instead, I would dedicate my life to become a huntress. So here I am, a criminal hiding in plain view, all with the help of a little black bow. Sip stared at her for a moment and Blake was worried he might turn her in. I don't believe you are a criminal. He said, causing those worries to go out the door, make her smile again for a moment. But someone here is. Gwyn's voice replied suddenly, making Sun scream as the table he was under was swiftly taken away. You know, I don't actually require food due to my robotic makeup. Penny stated, still not sure why Naruto and Ruby brought her to a small food stand where a certain old man worked as well. I can still eat it, but the energy I get is minimal. Naruto chuckled as they took their seats. Ruby opted for a snack in the form of chocolate cookies and he wanted to try this place's ramen since they had that as well. Kurama mentioned that he'd like it no matter what. Yeah, but this is a good place to talk as well. Oh. Okay. Penny replied happily. What did you want to talk about? Well, I don't know how new you are. So, I wanted to get to know you in general. Plus, I had a few ideas I wanted to run by you if Uncle Pietro didn't already give you them. Naruto replied. Oh? Well. I am very new. I finally got built recently. Still, I have seen a lot of your time with father and consider you my uncle. Penny replied cheerfully, making Naruto smile while rwby happily while munching on a cookie. Good. As for my idea, did Uncle Pietro give you any fail-safes if you were to get hacked? I know there aren't many who can do that, but I'd rather be safe than lose you to someone being malicious. And I know you are combat ready and everything, but do you have a backup in case your body fails? Naruto asked seriously. After all, he took his family seriously. Well, except his father for obvious reasons. If this was anyone else, Ruby replied after gulping a cookie down. It sounds perverted like Yang. Naruto stared at the silver-eyed girl at the comment. She picked up how perverted that sounded, but not the puns he and Yang threw at each other back in the forest of forever fall. Odd. Actually no. Penny provided thoughtfully. Father was rushed a bit at the end of my construction, so Atlas could have a full team. He did mention you'd help me if needed. Naruto nodded, figuring as much. General Ironwood was never that patient from what he remembered of the man and from what Winter told him. That is fine, I am sure I can make some sort of program to provide you with protection from hackers, viruses, and all that. Maybe get Gwen to chip in as well. Oh. I can help with backup stuff and upgrading your weapons. Ruby said with stars in her eyes and chuckled. Do you have any preferences to a backup body until your dad can make another for just in case with all the upgrades we'll give you? Penny nodded while smiling brightly. Noting too small please, I can be claustrophobic for some reason. I know I will not be optimal if I use this backup, but a cute chibi version of myself, please. You got it. Ruby replied. Later, she brought up an idea for spending more time together in an escape room or something. Those were always fun. When? Sun replied in a harried manner, especially when he noticed that her hands were behind her back. So nice to see you after so long. Is it? You never mentioned you were leaving. Gwyn replied evenly with that creepy smile that seemed to get bigger with each passing second and the increasing look of panic in Sun's eyes. All in all, this was a somewhat comical sight for Blake and Sid as they watched in morbid fascination. It did bring their moods up from their earlier conversation though. It is not for the reason you think, even though that rabbit freaked me the hell out, Sun mentioned before waving his hands frantically when he saw her eyes narrow and her hand slowly inch out from behind her back. Gwyn. Let's be rational, Mom and Dad decided that wanted to live in Mistral instead of Vacuo, I swear to Swear to me, Gwyn replied sweetly. Besides, you could have told me you were leaving. I was distracted, I didn't mean to leave you by yourself without saying goodbye. Sun pleaded. Oh son, that is such a poor excuse. It seems that your time in Mistral has wiped away your manners, and as someone from Mistral, I understand why. Time for some re-education. Gwyn replied as she took out the one thing that actually worked with Sun's erratic behavior. Have mercy. Sorry, all out. Gwyn chirped happily before she whacked him across the back of the head with a Harrison fan and then continued with Do as he cowered below her. Sid, for his part, just stared blankly. He was not expecting that from Gwyn. Shaking his head, he turned back to Blake, who had a wide-eyed look before chuckling to herself nervously. As I said, I don't believe you are a criminal. He said, catching her attention again. And I'm proud to call you my friend since you got out when you did. I still participated in the violence at first, Blake sighed out. She felt responsible for what the White Fang had turned into, especially her role in it. And I did steal a big-ticket item that was made by Atlas, but funded from schnee money. Objects can be replaced. Sid waved her off. The soul cannot. You leaving was best for you. Sid looked down into his teacup for a moment and smiled sadly. I will say I would have joined if not for 3 reasons. What are they? Blake asked, surprised he wanted to join at one point. Sid held up a finger. My passion for the theater. He held up a second finger as Gwyn rolled her eyes. I met my best friend and my team leader, and that led me to my new family. He held up a third finger as Blake and Gwyn smiled at him, all of them ignoring the whimpering coming from Sunday. Finally, I do not foresee a good end to this new White Fang's way of violence. You don't? Blake asked nervously. Sid shook his head no. Faunus are still humans. They are just more connected to the animal kingdom is all. That being said, if they succeed in their goals to wipe out humanity, they will just turn that violence inward as time goes on. There will always be those who think they are better than others. What if the predator types think they should rule and keep the rest under their thumb? When does it end? All that death is too much for any of the gates of death. Blake hated to admit it, but Sid was right. She had seen it with her old partner and a few others. That was where it would go next. I agree. Blake replied uncomfortably. But, I want to believe that the White Fang wasn't behind these simple dust robberies. They have never needed that much dust before. Sid eyed her for a moment before sighing. To be honest, I am unsure of that myself, but with the amount stole so far, it sounds like someone wants a war. Must be a way to prove that it wasn't them. Blake replied thoughtfully. I might know a way, Sun replied after Gwyn stopped hitting him with the paper fan. You do? Sid asked incredulously. That was a surprise to him. Yeah. Sun replied, not taking note that Sid didn't believe him. While I was on the ship, I heard some guys talking about a huge shipment coming in from Atlas. How huge? Blake asked curiously as the animal she was connected with. Huge. Sun replied with his arms spread out, not knowing how to describe it, but to him, it sounded like a big moment they were preparing for. Big Schnee Company freighter. You're sure? Blake asked, and he just nodded. Then that is our ticket to know the truth. Gwyn stated as she sat down next to Sid and Blake. Sun decided to stand. If you don't mind the extra help. Blake just smiled gratefully at her and Sun. Later that night, Blake, Sid, and Gwyn found themselves on top of an old building, overlooking the docks where a good number of shipping containers, with the Schnee Company logo, laid. Sun had been right about the rumor, and now all that was left was to do a stakeout. Lay in wait in case the robbers came to steal it all away. That being said, Blake still hoped that the people who came weren't the White Fang. Did I miss anything? Sun said as he jumped in with a basket of fruits and unique pastries. Not really. Blake intoned. They've unloaded all crates from the boat. Now the workers are just sitting there. Cool, Sun replied in a cheerful manner before putting the basket down. I stole everyone some food. Do you always break the law without a second thought? Blake asked with a frown. Never mind that, Gwyn broke in as she rushed to the basket of food with starry eyes as she looked at the food hungrily. Sun always did this back in Vacuo and I couldn't get him to stop. Now gimme. Sid sweat dropped at the food-loving side of his teammate. Sun, was she always live this back in Vacuo? Sun laughed nervously as he backed away from the girl and her food. Yes, and I learned the hard way to never get in between her and food, especially kinds that are not mainstream. Even Blake had to look at her fellow Frontis girl in shock. However, what banter they were planning was interrupted by high winds caused by a landing bullhead. Oh no. She replied with dread. It seemed that the robbers were the White Fang after all if the symbols on their backs were any indication. Sid sighed as he put a comforting hand on her shoulder. Now what? But Blake had no answer, she was too busy staring at them in disbelief. Down on the ground, what appeared to be the leader of this operation, started ordering the others to grab the tow cables so they could start hauling the containers away. Sun looked at the grunts on the ground to the frowning and sad eyes of Blake and asked, you really didn't think they were behind it, did you? Gwyn looked up from the basket of food and looked at her old friend with a raised eyebrow. He usually didn't use empathy, except with her. Maybe Mistral had been good for him, but why did she feel annoyed? No, I think deep down, I knew. I just didn't want to be right. Blake replied, feeling really guilty over the White Fang's further descent. Hey. What's the holdup? A new voice rang out to all the grunts of the White Fang, robbing the place blind. Well, maybe not totally blind. There were some nighttime dock workers still around, but they were going about their own business. Either they were paid off to not care, or they were afraid. But this was someone they all recognized from the news or somewhere else. Roman Torchwick, the notorious well-dressed thief. We are not exactly the most inconspicuous bunch of thieves at the moment, so why don't you animals try to pick up the pace? Given what she knew of the new leader and her old partner, a fire had been lit within Blake as she got up and took out her gamble shroud in katana mood. This isn't right. The White Fang would never work with a human, especially not one like that. Then she jumped the building. A confrontation was about to happen. Well, I figured we'd get involved. Sid sighed as he took out his shield, ready to step in and defend his friend if needed, which was very likely. Roman Torchwick was not known to be defenseless. This is crazy. Sun exclaimed, panicked that they actually had to fight now because of Blake. He actually thought that once they found out the truth, they'd get the heck out of there. Nope. Sun, get ready. I am not leaving them to fight on their own. Gwyn replied as she took out her halberd before shifting it to the sniper mode and taking off into the air, but not before stuffing another pastry in her mouth. Back on the ground, Roman was berating a less than intelligent thug holding a pile of rope. No you idiot, this isn't a leash. That was when Blake activated her aura shield and held him hostage with a sword to his neck. What the? Oh for F. Nobody move. Blake demanded as a couple of members of the White Fang came over to them, weapons drawn. Whoa, take it easy there little lady. The gentleman thief offered while positioning his cane on the ground between her legs, ready to shoot at the opportune time. However, Blake merely ignored him in favor of her former comrades. She ripped off her bow to display her cat ears, making the White Fang less tense, but just confused now. Brothers of the White Fang, why are you aiding this scum? Oh kid, didn't you get the memo? Roman asked, finding humor in his captors losing hold of the situation. What are you talking about? The White Fang and I are going in on a joint business venture together. Tell me what it is or I'll put an end to your little operation. Blake threatened, clearly annoyed. However, they were interrupted by the arrival of a few more bullheads coming in to land. I wouldn't exactly call it a little operation. Roman replied with humor in his voice, and when he knew she was good and distracted by the bullheads, he pulled the trigger on his cane. The resulting explosion knocked her away from him and the White Fang. Seeing that he had her on the back foot, he shot off a few more rounds, with a smirk. Here kitty kitty. However, he was smacked in the face with a banana peel, courtesy of Sun jumping in to help. Leave her alone. He demanded. However, more White Fang members jumped down from the bullheads to land on either side of Roman, intent on defending him. Some even landed behind Sun to block off an escape. You are not the brightest banana in the bunch, are you kid? Thankfully for Sun, a few well-placed sniper shots felled a few of the enemy enough for Sid to jump to Sun's aid. Bringing up his shield just as a sword strike was going to cut off Sun's head, Sid cringed and said, monkeys aren't known to be bright, but I hope you don't mind that I kitten. Dude, that was lame. Sun deadpanned as he whipped out his staff and started wailing on the attackers. I know and it physically hurt to say. Sid groaned as he uppercut a grunt, sending him flying back. I blame my team leader. Roman laughed at their banter, ignoring the fact that they easily took down his men. He smirked and shot off another blast at the boys this time. Sid easily blocked the shot and stood his ground when the blast impacted with his shield. This led to a 3-on-1 fight that Roman felt honored and cocky as he easily sidestepped a lot of Blake's sword swings, Sun's staff turning into a couple of nunchucks that blasted at him with shotgun shells, and Sid's Gatling gunshots from his shield. Roman did take notice that their teamwork was either rusty or non-existent and capitalized on that, making them hit each other a few times or just not go for an attack at all as one got in the way of another. However, he grew perpetually annoyed at the random sniper shots that rammed into his back, causing him to get hit a few times and deplete his aura sooner than he'd like. Roman felt he needed to escape and be quick as not only would these kids eventually win, he was primarily just a thief after all, but this operate was a bust. Sure, a few of his men got a shipping container here or there in his distraction of a fight, but there was no possible way they were getting all of it now. Surely all this noise was attracting the attention of many. Seeing an opportunity of a crate hanging in midair, he shot it down on top of his attackers and made his escape in the ensuing chaos. Sking in annoyance when he got to his ship at the fact he didn't take any of these kids out of the game with that stunt, Roman took the gunner's seat, ready to mow them down. It seemed that the captains of his other ships had the same idea as they all took aim at the 3 teens on the ground. That was when a roar sounded out throughout the docks and everything froze for a moment as a feeling of fear gripped them all. That was especially true when a single Grim fell from the sky. Watching as the dust settled, Sun had a particularly uneasy look on his face as he saw the creature. Heavy breathing was heard all throughout the area and many of the White Fang were growing nervous by the minute. Well, that was until they all got a good look at the creature. Oh no. Sid groaned to himself, well out of earshot, even in the noise of the chaos. A rabbit? Blake asked aloud at the strange-looking Grim. Indeed, this creature of Grim did look like a rabbit, but it also looked like it was crossed with a fox. Up in his bullhead, Roman had lost the battle of wits and was laughing his ass off. Come on. A rabbit, what's it gonna do, guys? Nibble our butts. Famous last words, Sun whimpered, especially when the Grim turned its red eye towards their little ground on the ground. It seemed to narrow its eyes at them before it huffed. Then with a mighty bound into the sky, it tore through the hull of the first bullhead, inciting a large explosion as they fell into the water. Blake couldn't believe her eyes at what she was seeing. One moment they were surrounded by members of the White Fang and a bunch of bullheads armed to take them out. The next moment, those same bullheads were raining down around them in fiery pieces as the remaining White Fang grunts were all screaming bloody murder as they ran around like chickens with their heads cut off. It was quite the sight. And Roman. He hightailed it the first chance he got when the first ship went down in a blaze of glory. He had enough weirdness for today, thank you very much. Naturally, all that chaos was bound to attract the attention of the police, and they were baffled by the scene when they pulled up, especially when that rabbit Grim seemed to just evaporate before everyone's eyes. It was a sight most would not forget. The 4 Fronis were questioned, but since they were known students of Beacon and one from Haven of Mistral, they were let go and told to be more careful. Of course, the medics had to take a look at them to see if they were okay before they left. That was the sight that the rest of Naruto's and Ruby's team saw when they arrived. Oh my are you all alright? Ruby all but screamed, especially when she saw the still raging flames of the downed bullheads. Blake smiled weakly. The aftermath had to be quite the sight. All their mission was supposed to be a stakeout to see just who the potential robbers had to be, but her own anger got the better of her, and this was the result. She felt responsible for it, and when she saw Weiss looking at her in concern, it hurt. We are good now. What's this rabbit Grim everyone is crying about? Did it really do all this? Yang asked, making Naruto's whole team to tense a bit. Yes, Sun replied as if in a daze and a bit of fear in his voice. That monster fell from the sky and annihilated everything. Gwyn, what did I say about your pet project? Naruto asked quietly with his arms crossed while using a subtly discreet form of sign language he and his team devised. It is still a secret, Gwyn replied while making an inconspicuous motion of defense. Not worried about that, Naruto replied shaking his head until a far-off look appeared in his eyes and he was minutely shaking. Please tell me that foul-tempered beast is gone. Gwyn rolled her eyes at her leader and nodded just as subtly. Weiss, I feel like should apologize to you. Blake started nervously as she walked over to the white-haired girl. Me? What for? Weiss asked. Blake closed her eyes and took a breath before she explained. The reason I was on you about Franus and the White Fang was that I used to be a member and I am one. I knew that already. Weiss replied with a shrug and then had a blush on her face as she said, if I remember correctly, the old leader's last name was Belladonna, which is yours. You knew? Blake nearly shouted. We are roommates, after all, I saw the ears one night. Weiss replied nonchalantly. And I don't care if you have super cute kitty ears or were once a member of the White Fang. You obviously had your reasons for leaving and you are here now as our teammate. That is enough for me. Thank you. Blake said and uncharacteristically embraced Weiss in a hug, who just smiled and hugged back. Yang leaned over to their ears with a big grin on her face and said, and besides, this is a good way for Blake's daddy to become Weiss's daddy. Shut up Yang. Both girls screamed at the blonde, who just bent over laughing along with Ebony. I've got a prank involving a reserve of forever full sap with your name on it if you keep going down that road, Naruto added nonchalantly with a smirk that Yang cockily matched. If you think I'm threatened by that, you're barking up the wrong tree. Yang replied with a giggle at her own pun that got one from Naruto and Ebony. Be glad we're not enemies, said Naruto, his voice taking on a slightly husky tone as he jokingly got in Yang's face, making her own cheeks dust over with red as it looked like he was about to kiss her, otherwise, I'd give you a licking you'd never forget. All faces, sans Ruby, Penny, and Naruto's, went super red, with Yang's being the darkest as the implications played hell with her imagination. When Blake recovered from that set of images in her head, she fished out a small device from her pocket and offered it to Naruto. Here, shortly before I left the new White Fang, I and a few others stole this from a remote research base. Please take it. Naruto and Penny's eyes blinked in surprise at what was shown in front of them. So what is it you wanted to say about this? Asked Blake as her team, Naruto and Penny found a secluded training area at Beacon to discuss the device in question the day after classes. First, I'm surprised you got your hands on it, Penny replied, and second, I've got some questions. Such as? Yang asked while partially avoiding Naruto's eyes, the memories of last night still going strong in her mind, as well as some budding feelings being examined. Do you know what it is? Asked Penny. From what little data we could take with, Blake answered, it is some kind of experimental semblance amplifier. What? Exclaimed her teammates. The Semblance High-Intensity Variable Amplification, or SHIVA system, Penny began, is a symbiotic nanotic multi-variable semblance expansion and amplification network for in-battle advantage acquisition and survivability enhancement. In layman's terms, a nano-machine-based semblance amplifier, Naruto translated, that can artificially add characteristics to a user's semblance in real time during a fight to increase the chances of winning and surviving. I see. Said Blake. Next question. Have you used it? Asked Penny. Other than applying and/or removing it, no, Blake replied, then followed up with, why? Because the simulations that father had completed before its theft showed a 65% system failure rate after a short period of time, Penny explained, had you entered combat blind while using SHIVA, you would have lost any gained benefits and had been left vulnerable from the confusion and shock of such loss. Oh, said appealing Blake. Also if you are intending to train with it, said Penny, you need Naruto and I to help you acclimate and while developing the prototype into a more completed iteration. Why go so far? Asked Blake. Because I convinced Penny that having a perfected version would benefit a lot of people, Naruto answered, keeping parts from your past from coming back to haunt you in the worst way possible seems like a good example. Blake nodded with mild fear mixing with growing determination as her mind flashed back to the night before. Interesting. Naruto pondered aloud as he stared at John. Naruto. John and Purah were in another training field, this time trying to help John again. That trick with his sword really caught Naruto's attention. So you are saying all you felt in the heat of the moment against Ursa was a mere buildup of power? Yes. John answered, just confused about the whole thing. I felt like I had to release it somehow, so I imagined just throwing it out. I never expected it to be a sword beam of all things. It would make sense. Purah deduced. When I first unlocked your aura, I was blown away by how massive it felt. In this instance, it only grew and in your excitement, you felt the need to release it. Naruto had a thoughtful look on his face. John's power seemed familiar for some reason, but could not place it. Kurama mentioned it was related to his past somehow. Still, it gave the schnee an idea. John, try something for me. Take Purah's hands. Try channeling that build-up feeling, but instead of releasing it outward, try and give it to Purah. Alright, John replied nervously, while Purah just held out her hands with the ever-present smile she used with him. It took a moment as he focused on his aura for a moment. It was still difficult for him, but he eventually grabbed hold of it and felt that need to push it outward. So he did as Naruto asked, and as soon as he did, Purah gasped as she felt her aura overload to the point it was visible, and it felt amazing. They felt connected in some way. Neither one knew how far that went through. Looking back to Naruto who had a big smirk on his face, John asked, now what? Now I think I know how your semblance works. We are going to have to include Gwyn in these sessions. Naruto explained. You both have a support aspect to your semblances, but yours can be used for offense as well. Naruto and Ruby entered the lunchroom with huge smirks on their faces as they rushed over to a table that their teams shared and Team JNPR was right across from them. In fact, Nora was having her own fun by flicking grapes over to Yang so she could catch them with her mouth. Although, knowing Nora, she wouldn't just stop with grapes when she ran out. That was when Naruto dropped a rather large binder filled to the brim with paper, Ruby vibrating in place next to him, barely able to contain her excitement. Both Sid and Weiss's eyes widened upon seeing their smirks and said in unison, oh no, what have you planned? Something fun for the whole school. Naruto chortled. Yup, but mostly for us. Ruby commented before clearing her throat for her big speech. Sisters, friends Weiss. Hey. 47 minutes ago, I had a dream then I recruited Naruto for my dream. This ought to be good. Yang commented to the group but blushed when she made eye contact with Naruto, who just smiled at her, not even picking up why she was blushing. He was too excited, so she took a breath and calmed down. Should I call the local therapist now or later? Any other pranks you two have cooked up can only wreak havoc on the student body's minds. Sid snarked with a slight smirk as he casually ate his lunch, watching in amusement. No, Naruto drawled out innocently, making Weiss narrow her eyes at him. Come on, our dream is harmless, we just want to have as much fun as we can before the semester starts up again. Wait, did you steal my binder for this? Weiss asked. I am not a crook. Ruby replied cheekily with peace signs, imitating a certain former president. Alright, I'll bite, what are you talking about? Blake asked. I am talking about kicking off the semester with a bang. Ruby declared. Deciding to be a bit risque again, Yang smirked at Naruto and said, always kick my semesters off with a yang. The group groaned at her horrible pun while Nora booed. Naruto, however, just chuckled at the pun, even though he wasn't picking up on the double meaning there. Oh, there will be time for that. Naruto replied in a somewhat husky voice, making the others think that he did pick up on it. Well, before he dropped a rather large dust rocket on the table, making them all blink and wonder where he hid that. I bet this bad boy will let off plenty of yangs. Yang actually fell out of her seat laughing at that, even missing the apple Nora sent her way for the horrible pun, she didn't even care that he didn't pick up on her other joke. This was too great. Weiss on the other hand had a thoughtful look. Do any of those pranks target the incoming contestants for the Vital Festival? Weiss asked with a devious look on her face, making her teammates gawk at her. This was a side they didn't really see that often. Yang got back in her chair, smirking at the eventual carnage. My dear sister, it is like you don't know me at all. Naruto replied in mock shame before his smirk returned in full force, scaring and exciting everyone at the same time. If I can get our big sister, Winter. Then I can certainly get all the newbies if I wanted. And yes, with some help from you, Ruby and Nora, they will fear our names. What? Leading your older sister on a merry chase all throughout Remnant wasn't enough? Ebony asked with mirth. So let me get this straight. Weiss said, catching their attentions. You and Ruby have set up a fun day, all before the second semester starts up again. Yes. It will be the best day ever. Ruby cheered. I don't know whether to be proud or scared for what the two of you have in store, but I am in. Weiss replied while leaning on her cheek, a goofy smile adorning her face. I dunno, given what happened the other day. Blake started, sounding a bit depressed, while Yang picked up the apple meant for her face and chucked it back at Nora. I might sit this one out. That was something Sid picked up on, Blake's depression at her old for a lack of a better word family, and sighed. He wanted to cheer up his friend, and the only way to currently do that was to go along with Naruto and Ruby's insane day of fun and pranks. I think however we spend this last day, we all do it as one big team. Weiss stated, hoping Blake would actually join in. However, she never noticed that Nora had come back with a dessert to throw at Yang and completely missed her and hit Weiss in the face with a cream pie. Once the pants slid off her face in the silence of her friend's shock and Team JNPR's shame, she wiped out the desert around her eyes and glared at the orange tea. Nora, I hope you know this means war. Naruto and Ruby eyed each other then smirked, they could certainly check one thing off. Food fight. Man, this is harsh. A blue-haired teen said to Sun as they walked over to the lunchroom, not knowing of the impending doom. This young man was Sun's teammate, Neptune. He wore a white dress shirt and black tie under a red jacket adorned with a wide, upturned black collar and a silver reticle across the back. He also sported a pair of gray jeans with black padding strapped to the sides, as well as black shoes fastened with straps instead of laces. Yeah, she was super fast and I threw a banana at a guy, which sounds gross, but it was awesome. Sun raved about his time helping his friends against a super thief with a white fang. Then I got surrounded, which is usually not an issue for me, but we were backed up by a sniper and a shield guy. Nice. You bet, it was nice seeing an old friend again in that sniper. Sun replied with a nostalgic smile, something his friend picked up on. And the best part, we were all as oh, but don't tell anyone. That's a secret, okay? Got it? And I'm gonna go tell Scarlet being Sun's back secret, Sun replied seriously. I am talking about secret. Whoa, chill out man, I got it. Neptune replied in a low placating voice, letting his teammate know it was between them. You better, I just don't want to screw this all up, the people here, including my old friend, are the coolest. Sun cheered. Oh, no offense to you guys. None taken. Neptune said. He felt that this was different for his teammate. The way to talk about his old friend made him think something was there. He was fine being the wingman here. But he did have to wonder why a few people ran past them in a panic. Okay, they're just in here. I am really excited for you to meet them, so be cool, okay? You're going to be cool, right? Dude. Neptune retorted, gesturing to all of him that he was cool, to begin with. The shine on his smile told everyone that. Good point. Sun replied, kind of embarrassed that he was nervous about that. His whole team was cool. Upon opening the double doors to the lunchroom, the duo was met with sheer panic as the rest of the student body ran out of the room, some even screaming in panic. Neptune actually looked shocked at the scene before him. And Sun. Well, he was just excited to see how all this would go down. Food fight. Ah ha ha ha. Nora laughed from atop a mountain of lunch tables, chairs, and some vending machines. I'm queen of the castle, I'm queen of the castle. Down with the monarchy. Ebony roared out jubilantly as she noticed that Sid and Gwyn had joined Nora's tyranny. Sid, ever being the straight man, played as an advisor. Of course, Nora barely listened to Ren, why would she listen to him? Still, they cut imposing figures upon the perceived underdogs. You will try, but we have the high ground. Sid replied with a slight smirk and some fire in his eyes. He usually didn't go against his team leader, but in this instance, it was just good fun. That too, Sid? Naruto asked dramatically, playing really good at looking betrayed. Not to worry my friend, Ruby replied just as dramatically. Justice will be swift, justice will painful. It will be delicious. Yeah. The group roared with even Weiss getting into the spirit with a goofy smile adorning her face. Off with their heads. Nora demanded they all jump down and started launching the whole-sized watermelons at the enemy team. Looking around quickly, Ruby shouted, Yang turkey. Naruto, base. As soon as Yang and Naruto picked up their impromptu weapons, the two shared a look. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? Yang asked. I believe I am. Naruto laughed as he used his large fish to bat his watermelons back at the enemy group. It's time for a little surf. And turf. Yang cheered as they either smashed or repelled the melon rain. Predictable, Sid called off as he picked up a couple of lunch trays and used them as shields to block the melons. Smirking when he saw one coming in at the right angle, he also used his trays like swords and sliced and diced them before chucking them up into the air. Gwyn. Roger. Gwyn shouted as she used her wings to blow all the pieces around the battlefield, pelting them all and making everything slippery and sticky. Well, other than Ebony's, said Naruto sharing a sideways glance with Yang, before blatantly looking that made her briefly blush, there goes your twins' competition in the juicy department. Ignoring the melon rain, followed by grapes, apples, and peas, Ebony and Blake took long weapons-grade loaves of bread that took care of the rain from above, before rushing Purah and John with their own sword breads. Ebony got in close to John's personal space, smirking when he blushed a bit before she smacked him into Purah with her bread sword to the face. Ever the expert fighter, Purah recovered quickly. Picking up John's discarded bread sword, she began to dual-wield against Ebony and Blake while dodging whatever food Ruby sent her way. While they were duking it out, John was slowly getting back up and saw Naruto with his fish slowly coming his way with a giant scary smile. Naruto was going to slap him silly. Thinking quickly, he grabbed the nearest thing around him and chucked them at the male schnee. That ended up being hundreds of sauce packets that exploded on impact, making the schnee the new condiment king. "Oh, John." Naruto recovered quickly with a menacing smile, "If you are going to come at me with weak sauce." The white-haired boy then turned around to the table that Yang was on, with both nodding to each other before he smashed his fist down on it as she jumped. The contents of said table were many gourds of squash that were flung at the poor blonde boy. Prepare to get squashed. For a moment as the vegetables exploded on John's chest, he wondered who bought squash of all things. But that was the only moment of thought he was allowed to have, as then both Naruto and Yang flung their weapons into two different directions. A turkey knocked the air out of John before a fish slapped him in the face, sending him tumbling back. As for the other target, a turkey veered off course and hit Gwyn in the head, dazing her a bit, and then a fish hit her wing, causing her to spiral out of control. "Air support down, I repeat, air support down." Gwyn cried out with swirls in her eyes as she went careening to the front door. Right where Sun and Neptune were, the latter of which jumped up to catch her with ease. "Wait, Gwyn." Neptune shouted with eyes the size of dinner plates. "You know her?" Sun asked in a worried tone. While Gwyn was getting to know two old friends, Purah had been knocked on her back when Ruby joined Ebony and Blake in a 3-on-1. However, she was able to take out Ebony and Blake before she went down. When she went down, so did Ren as he slipped on the ketchup trap that Y set up, sending him crashing into more tables. That was when Nora came crashing down on them with a watermelon she had stabbed with a small flagpole in it in a makeshift Gallagher hammer. One she quickly used to punt Ruby away before she could do any more damage. Well, Weiss had other plans. Picking up a literal swordfish while wondering who ordered that, she rushed Nora into a duel of sword versus hammer. Sadly, Nora won that duel by slamming her across the room and through a pillar, knocking her out. Thankfully, Ruby caught her, but by then it was too late. "Had enough?" asked Sid as he and Naruto circled one another as Yang and Ren fought with turkeys and leeks. "You wish." Naruto replied while twirling around some fish he picked up before the two charged at one another. Sid came in with a jab to the face with his lunch trays, only for the schnee to duck under it and then smack his friend across the face multiple times and then dodge again, much to his own amusement. That was when Yang's turkey punched Ren just as Naruto was ducking under another swipe to his face and the two boys tumbled end over end, which then caused Ren to lay flat on his face and Sid somehow draped over a down vending machine. In another portion of the Battle of the Foods, Purah noticed that Nora was keeping Blake at bay with exploding frizzy drinks and that gave her an idea. Pulsing her aura into the ground around her, she found she was able to control all the soda cans in the general vicinity. The side effect of this was that she also took hold of the vending machines as well. The perks of her control training with John and Naruto. Seeing what Purah was doing made Ebony smirk. "I'm about to ruin this woman's whole career," she thought giddily as she pulsed her electricity through her hands before pulsing that outward toward the oncoming rain of soda cans. The two oncoming forces met with all the pop in the middle. With the two opposing forces of artificial magnetism at work, it wasn't long before the cans were crushed, forcing all the fizzy liquid to rain down on all of them. As for the vending machines, Naruto picked up Weiss's discarded swordfish. Waiting until the last second, Naruto smirked as he sliced them down the middle, and Yang punched the pieces to the side or in the direction of Purah and John, who had to quickly get out of the way. Unfortunately for them, they took their eyes away from Nora and her melon smasher. With two quick swings, she launched both Naruto and Yang through the roof. "I was not expecting that." Naruto replied casually as they continued to soar high until their apex. "Do we have a landing strategy?" "I was just going to let my aura take the blow." Yang replied with a shrug. "I have a better idea and I think you will like it, Yang." Naruto told her as he brought the rocket out from earlier, making her start cracking up again. "If I didn't know any better, I'd swear you planned this whole thing," Yang commented. Naruto just smiled at her. "You didn't actually plan this, did you?" The white-haired schnee's continued smirk was telling, and she loved it. Naruto just continued to smile at her as he lit the fuse, neither admitting or denying it. "Hold on tight," Naruto declared as he stretched out a hand for her to take. Yang just smirked at him before taking said hand and letting her then jump on his back as they began to ride the rocket like a surfboard. They entered back into the building just in time to see Ruby using her speed semblance to plow the opposite team into their destroyed castle and into the wall behind them, along with every piece of food and other debris, thanks to the backdraft. Naruto's smile grew wide and he hopped off the rocket with Yang still on his back and watched as the rocket stopped just before the impacted team and then explode in a wave of pie cream, feathers, and glitter. Gwyn, who was taken out early, stared in disbelief as her losing team. She had been the only one on her team that was spared the Naruto surprise. She couldn't believe her luck. "Man, I love these guys." Sun roared out in joy, not even noticing that Neptune did get hit with some of the splashback. Before the blue-haired team could dish out a retort, Professor Goodwitch came barreling in with a massively pissed-off look on her face. Using her telekinesis and with a wave of her riding crop, she managed to fix everything from the broken vending machines to the holes in the ceiling. It was a sight to see. "Children, please, do not play with your food," she growled out through gritted teeth. Her response was Nora burping out loud, and then all the whipped cream that found its way to the ceiling fell on the already dirty teens. "Let it go," Professor Osborne stated once he made his way into the lunchroom with an amused smile to try and calm down his friend and subordinate. He had seen the whole thing from outside and had to admit that it was fun to watch, especially Naruto and Ruby's finishers. "Ugh, they're supposed to be the defenders of the world," Glinda replied somberly. "And they will be, but right now they're still children," Osborne stated with a small but melancholy smile that Glinda took note of. "So why not let them play the part? After all, it isn't a role they'll have forever." "So, how do you know Neptune?" Sun asked his avian companion nervously. "I told you I was from Mistral originally, son," Gwyn replied as the three of them walked the courtyard with the blue-haired warrior eyeing Gwyn nervously and then smiling sheepishly to Sunday. "He was my friend there and just like you, he tried to flirt with me." "She shut that down pretty quick," Neptune admitted. Both boys shuddered. "But when I moved, I made sure to let him know," Gwyn replied evenly, making Sun shiver in fear. "Unlike you." "Then how about we just hang out, like old times?" Sun suggested. If their teammates saw them now, both Sun and Neptune would be made fun of for a long time. Their whole group were lady charmers and to be seen as whipped by one small girl was funny. But they went way back, so there was a familiarity there. And an attraction. The next day after their fun was over, Naruto found himself on one of the balconies of Beacon, watching the parade of war machines make their way onto the school ground and surrounding city of Vale with an exhausted look. It would seem that old Ironwood had to make a show of power just to enter the vital festival. Sid walked up to his friend with an unsure look. And yet knew what this sight was doing to the schnee, especially after what Naruto experienced the night before in his sleep, but still asked anyways, "How are you holding up?" Naruto sighed. "A bit taxed, but otherwise fine." And that is disregarding Ironwood's currently short-sighted peacock act. Which is adding to the powder keg that's being crafted behind the scenes. "In peacetime, prepare for war," Sid quoted. "You said that to us often, but you also know where war, poverty, and sickness lead to. Death. You prepared us, let us show you how we do." Naruto gave his best friend a wry smile. "Thanks." Naruto leaned against the front door, waiting to talk to the man responsible for the war machines on Beacon's front door. He knew it was a long time coming, including talking to Winter. But Ironwood would have to do for now. Soon, the man came into a view with his brisk walk and stiff nature that he remembered of the man. James eyed the young man in front of him, blocking the doors with some annoyance before his eyes widened in familiarity. How could he forget this kid? "Ares. I haven't seen you in a long time." Naruto rolled his eyes with a smile. "That's true and you already forgot that I like to be called Naruto." James hit a snicker. "I still don't understand why you wanted to be named after a fish cake that goes on ramen." That seemed to tick Naruto off and with a childish put, he said, "It is Maelstrom." "Whatever you say, Ares." James chuckled. He always enjoyed chatting with this schnee, especially when Winter brought him along. "I am still sad you didn't join the Atlas military like your older sister. I could have used another specialist." Naruto scratched his nose at that. "Well, Wise shot off over here and I felt it better if I went along." James smiled warmly. He could accept that. "Whatever the case, I am glad you're not dead like your father proclaimed." "Yeah well, that man claims a lot of things. Thankfully this one didn't stick." Naruto replied before he looked at a passing bullhead and decided to fish for information. "So, who are we fighting?" "Ugh, no one, I just decided to bring some of my work with me." James replied with a bit of tightness in his voice. That was something he wasn't sure Naruto was ready for, but honestly, if Naruto was his soldier, he felt like he could trust the boy more. Naruto shrugged. "Wars come in many ways, so I guess being prepared never hurt. Whether you are fighting a normal war or," he decided to test the general a bit with flashing his eyes red a split second, "or a shadow war. So I guess I should say, good luck with the vital festival." "I sure hope you are up for it." James replied after a moment as Naruto passed him. He did see the flash and it worried him. Unlike the boy's father, he did care for his well-being. What did he encounter to change him? He never talked about war like that before and did he know something about Salem somehow? Shaking his head, he left with a parting shot and smirk. "And prepare for your sister. She is really not happy." "Oh don't remind me." Naruto winced, making Ironwood roar with laughter as he went inside Beacon. "Ironwood certainly likes bringing his work wherever he travels." Glinda stated tersely as she and Osborne observed the incoming Atlas war machines. It did not sit well with her. "Well, running an academy and military makes him a busy man," Osborne stated, trying to speak for his friend. But even he had his limits. But yes, those are a bit of an eyesore. There was a beep from his terminal and he let the person at his door come in and speak of the devil, it was Ironwood, come to greet them. Osborne. James replied jubilantly, he hadn't seen the man in a while after all. Hello General. Osborne replied politely. Please, drop the formalities. One of your students that you unknowing took from me already did. Ironwood replied with a big smile as he shook his friend's hand. It's been too long. And Glinda. It has certainly been too long since we last met. Oh James. Glinda with a fake smile and sarcasm in her voice before she turned to her boss. I'll be outside. Well, she hasn't changed a bit. James replied with some mirth. Osborne gave him a smirk before walking back to his desk to pour a cup of coffee for his friend. So, what in the world has brought you down from Atlas? Headmasters don't typically travel with their students for the Vital Festival. James took the offered cup and poured in a little something extra for kick from his flask. Well, you know how much I love Vale this time of year. Ironwood chatted amicably. Besides, with you hosting, I thought this an opportunity to catch up. I had the pleasure of reuniting with Aries Schnee. You're lucky to have him. Like Pietro, I consider him my nephew. I can certainly appreciate quality time between friends and don't think I will just have him transferred to Atlas. He is a good student and I doubt you'd get him to leave his team or sister. Osborne replied with a bit of mirth as he went to go sit in his desk chair. That is when he grew serious. However, the small fleet outside still has me somewhat concerned. Well, concern is what brought them here. James replied, finally getting to the real point of why he was here. I understand travel between kingdoms has become increasingly difficult. Osborne reasoned. Ironwood pressed, you and I both know why I brought those men. Osborne couldn't help but sigh, he was hoping to avoid this conversation. We are at a time of peace. Shows of power like this are just going to give off the wrong impression. But if what Crow said is true then. If what Crow said is true, then we will handle it tactfully, Osborne interjected, trying to get to common ground again. He didn't want to rush into things. It is the Vital Festival. A time to celebrate unity and peace. So I suggest you not scare people by transporting hundreds of soldiers halfway across the continent. I am just being cautious. James stated, knowing that Osborne shut him down and he was unhappy at that turnaround. They were friends, but they had opposing views on how certain matters needed to be handled. As am I, Osborne replied. Which is why we continue to train the best huntsmen and huntresses we can. Believe me. I am. Ironwood said as he turned to leave. He was going to ask about Naruto, but he chose not to. If anything happened to Beacon like he feared, he would take care of the boy and his sisters if he had to. He once again had to leave a parting shot as he thought about the war-conscious boy. But ask yourself this. Do you honestly believe your children can win a war? I hope they never have to. Osborne said quietly in a now empty room. Yang Xiaolong, prepare your kingdom for battle. Ruby yelled in the school's library. At this point, no one tried telling her group to stay quiet. They were too into playing Remnant's version of Risk. This was the scene Naruto walked in on. Team rwby playing their game, Team JNPR studying and goofing off. And as for his team, Ebony was actually studying, Gwyn was chatting with Sun and Neptune, and Sid was talking to Blake in her game. Even Naruto could see that Blake was still depressed about the White Fang incident at the docks. Bring it on. Walking past Yang, he saw her hand was full of trap cards, and he smirked. So that was her play. Pranks and trickery. They were closer than he thought and he liked that. I deploy the Legionnaire fleet. Ruby declared with gusto, causing Yang to gasp in horror, while Y sat there confused and the cat Franus barely paid attention. So, Naruto circled to Weiss, intending to help her because she needed it the most. Looks like I get to fly right over your Urasi and attack your walls directly. You fiend. And since Atlas is part of Mantle, my repair time only lasts one turn. Pretty sneaky sis. Yang chuckled confidently, catching Ruby off guard and making Naruto nearly laugh out loud at her deviousness. Yang flipped over a card with a flourish, but you just activated my trap card. What? Giant Nevermore. Yang exclaimed, if I roll a 7 or higher, fatal feathers will slice your fleet in two. But. Ruby countered, if you roll a 6 or lower, the Nevermore will turn on your own forces. That's just a chance I am willing to take. Yang replied with a determined grin and then a wink to Naruto when she saw him, making her smirk, especially when she rolled and got what she wanted, causing Ruby to scream out in horror as Yang claimed her rewards. Well Weiss, it is your turn. Yang said, catching her attention. I have no idea what is going on, Weiss admitted, not even realizing she attacked her own fleet a couple of turns. Strategy stuff has always been Naruto's thing. Then do you mind if I offer some help? Naruto suddenly said, making Weiss nearly jump out of her seat and Naruto to snicker. Yes. Weiss replied after recovering, she hated the fact that he was so good at sneaking up like that, I would love that. Right, you're the kingdom of Vacuo. Gwyn would get a kick out of this. Naruto muttered as he observed her cards, making both Ruby and Yang a bit nervous at the intense calculating look. Interesting, I had no idea they had that legend included in these cards. Okay. I have something for you. Sliding up one card so that it was higher than the others. Use Resourceful Raider to take the remains of all discarded fleets like Ruby's recent loss to take for yourself. He then slid up 3 more cards for her. People from Vacuo have acquired an endurance boost against natural hazards, so these next 3 will be clutch. Use the cover of Sandstorm to disable Yang's ground forces and Infiltrator Kingdom. All the while, these big nasties, Devourer's Nightmare and Summoner's Annihilation, will set off all around, taking out food rations, supply chains, and all around be a big hazard that will destroy any chance of your enemies recovering anytime soon. At that last part, Ebony was suddenly at their table in an instant with a look of interest on her face, while Gwyn smirked from her spot next to Sun and Neptune. So is that good? Weiss asked because to her, she just brought chaos onto the world and technically, she did think it was overboard. You're just 2 moves from concurring remnant. Ruby sobbed. Ah, ha ha ha. Weiss jolted up with maniacal joy. Yes. Fear the almighty power of my forces. Nothing can beat me. Trap card, Yang replied with a cheeky smirk, but that was wiped away when Naruto spoke up again. Actually, these nightmares have a secondary effect of bringing in Grim to destroy what's left, making trap cards useless. Oh my Weiss is actually going to win, Yang replied, shell-shocked. Naruto had some pretty good strategy, she needed that on her side. Blake, you're up. Make a counter, hell will freeze over on us. Breaking from her conversation with Sid, she looked at her cards and said, I haven't been paying attention. What am I doing? You're playing as Vale, trying to conquer the kingdoms of Remnant. Yang explained. But to be honest, Blake's heart and mind weren't in it. She was too busy being worried about what would happen to the White Fang and Beacon. There was one thing that this game made her see, and that would be the possibility that the White Fang really do want to go to war. That thought terrified her. Sid, seeing her get mopey in her own head again, sighed. Maybe this strategy game is what you need. How do you figure? Blake asked while the others took interest. Blake, I know you are used to handling what is going with the White Fang on your own, and I can see how this is worrying you. Sid explained before gesturing to the entire group in the library. He wasn't worried about being overheard because Ruby's loud game had driven away most of the people who wanted to study. The only one really studying was Ren, and he was used to the loud distractions thanks to Nora. But you have an entire support system here for you. Weiss sighed and put down her cards. He's right, and you have been more quiet, antisocial, and moody as of late, and even I am worried for you. So please, let us help in any way we can. Blake looked at the concerned faces of her friends and looked to be on the verge of tears. She had grown to like them and didn't want to lose them. They all knew who and what she was and accepted her, no questions asked. I am just worried what the White Fang is planning, and I am not sure we are ready. The police and huntsmen have no idea, and we are all still in school earning to be better huntsmen and huntresses. Naruto grunted. She is right on that. Naruto said, catching their attention. But we are students, we aren't really ready to handle this. Weiss interjected as the voice of reason. Fail to prepare, prepare to fail. Naruto sounded, and it made some of their blood to run cold. Blake, do you feel up to poking our noses where they shouldn't be? I would like to find out what their next move is. Blake admitted. Then let's do it. Ebony stated from her spot. We have the will and many options to do this, including stealth. I would like to know more and be prepared in case the worst should happen. Gwyn started from her seat. Plus, we have a small collection of intellectuals to set up a strategy to put your mind at ease. And if we have to fight, we have your back. Purah declared as she walked over to the group with Nora vibrating in place next to her. Blake smiled gently at her friends and nodded. All the best stories have a small group poking their noses where they shouldn't be, only to come out on top. Let's do it. Yes. I love it when you're feisty. Yang cheered. While the group of friends was planning on disturbing the peace by ousting a terrorist group, a certain group of villains in Cinder, Emerald, and Mercury were roaming the halls of the school. They had already scouted out some of the competition in the library, playing a strategy game rather enthusiastically, and then some in the dorms. They came to the conclusion that their mission was going to be way too easy. However, Cinder's curiosity wasn't sated, so that was why they were roaming the halls of the school. She had seen various teachers, like the coffee addict Oobleck in the endless supply of hot air and port. But there was more that had her curiosity. The rumor of a new teacher this year that was quiet and kept to himself outside of class, but was actually a good teacher. Walking by said classroom, her lone visible eye widened to epic proportions, and she felt like she was having an out-of-body experience. There, in the classroom, was the only man she would ever call father. Rhodes was a professor now, and he looked so old. Actual warmth crept into her eye as she gazed at the decidedly older man now. Sadly, the last time she had seen him was when she killed her abusive foster family in Atlas and used her words to convince him to let her go instead of arresting her. Coming to a realization that she wanted to connect with the man again and to save him from a fate that this school would fall to, she walked into the classroom to try and recruit him in a subtle way. This was one person she wanted to survive. After all, he taught her how to live and freed her. Now it was time to do the same for him. "Long time no see, old man," she called out, much to Emerald and Mercury's confusion. Looking up from his paper world with a slightly annoyed expression, thinking it to be one of his rowdier students, he turned to see a sight he hadn't seen in a long time. And it racked him with guilt as the memories came crashing down on him. How could he forget the one little girl he trained to defend herself and grew so close to that he saw her as his own daughter? Then she killed the family that tormented and tortured her day in and day out. And he let her go. After a while, he accepted it because those people really were scum after some other secrets became known about them. They were going to face the death penalty if they got caught anyway. Still, he felt a lot of guilt for giving her the tools to dirty to her soul, not capturing her at the time, and finally not being there for her after the fact. He hadn't seen her in years and she was nearly a grown woman now. Making a decision as he got up out of his chair and walked towards her, he decided he was going to make up for lost time. Standing in front of the girl now woman, he smiled gently at her and said, "How have you been?" He replied gently before leaning in and hugging her, something that she allowed and hugged back, and those feelings all returned in an instant. Mercury and Emerald just looked flabbergasted at seeing a side of their boss they never ever thought to see. And Emerald felt really jealous of some random old man. What if Godlike Naruto x Winter schnee rwby? And thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoy this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel and leave a like if you guys need the next part, comment down, and thanks for watching the video and see you guys in the next video.